It was late August, and the sky was a heavy blanket of leaden clouds. Rain fell in thin, weaving lines, drifting through the air before splashing softly against the pavement. I stood inside my high-rise apartment, staring out at the gray world. In exactly 1 year, the Great Awakening would begin. Right now, the rest of the world was moving along like business as usual. People were still chasing degrees and hoarding wealth, completely unaware that in 12 months, their diplomas and bank accounts would be nothing more than useless scraps of paper. The era of practitioners was coming, and the curtain was about to rise. I looked at myself in the mirror. My name is Fongy. I saw a young man looking back at me, lean, but not weak, with a face that carried a certain rugged sharpness. It was the kind of look the older generation always admired. I knew what was coming. I'd read enough novels to understand the pattern. Once the spiritual energy returned, the world would flip upside down. Beasts would mutate, cities would fall into chaos, and the entire planet would evolve in a terrifying, unknown direction. Strength would be everything. If I wanted a seat at the table in the future, I had to get strong now. Before all this, I was just a regular high school senior. I'd failed the college entrance exams. While my peers were heading off to prestigious universities, I didn't even qualify for a standard undergraduate program. My only real claim to fame was my face, which had managed to land me a goddess of a girlfriend in high school, Chu Qingli. She was stunning, elegant, and perfect in every way, from her grades to her wealthy family background. After the exams, she got into the top university in the country, Tsinghua. Her future was limitless. She was the golden girl, the daughter of heaven. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Because I was a slacker who could only get into a lowly vocational college. Everyone at school had been placing bets on how fast we'd break up. To them, she was the bright moon in the sky, and I was the mud on the ground. We lived in two different worlds. But the times were changing. I wondered how the great school beauty would feel a year from now, realizing that all those years of grueling study and the knowledge she worked so hard for were completely worthless. My eyes suddenly flickered with a golden light. Nobody could have guessed that the Great Awakening would start with me. How did I know all this? A cold, mechanical voice echoed in my mind. Spiritual energy recovery has officially begun. Auto-coding system activated. Countdown to global awakening. 364 days, 11 hours, 55 minutes, 35 seconds. As a transmigrator, I knew this was my standard issue cheat code. Every traveler needs a system, and I finally had mine. This was the starting point of everything. My system came from the ultimate depths of the universe, using a top-tier algorithm to encode cultivation methods based on whatever spiritual objects I encountered. Right now, the rest of the world was blind. I was the only one who knew the truth, giving me a full year's head start. As the energy slowly seeped back into the world, rare spirit fruits and strange anomalies would start appearing. They would all be mine. I was on a racetrack where no one else had even reached the starting line. By the time they realized the race had begun, I'd be miles ahead, a god among men. My eyes glowed with excitement. It wasn't just humans that would change. Plants and animals would bathe in this energy and mutate. The earth would overflow with vitality, producing super fruits with extraordinary powers. Even the sky would change, aurora like pillars of light, strange new constellations, divine fires, and heavenly thunder. Every single one of those phenomena would be raw material for my system. I could see something and code it into a powerful technique. And this was just the beginning. The system would only get better as the awakening progressed. I looked down at the bustling city below. It was crowded and noisy, a place where money and power divided people into strict classes. In 1 year, that social ladder would be smashed to pieces. The world would be reshuffled. Those at the top would fall, and the newcomers would climb to the peak. Then, I thought of Chu Qingli. She hadn't contacted me in 3 days. In the eyes of society, she was a soaring phoenix, and I was an ugly duckling. But that dynamic was about to rot away. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a message from her. Fongy, I've thought about it a lot. I don't think we're realistic anymore. High school romance eventually has to wake up to reality. We just aren't a good match. Building a life together takes courage, but it also takes being on the same level socially and financially. Let's break up. It was the most cliché breakup speech ever written. But knowing what I knew, I felt a strange sense of irony. It felt like one of those 30 years east, 30 years west moments from a story. I tried to stay serious, but the corner of my mouth was twitching upward. I could hardly suppress the grin. I guess the old saying is true. The first thing you do when you make it is cut ties with the person you used to love. I expected her to dump me. Anyone who didn't know about the apocalypse would think she was making the smart move. To her, the dream was over. To me, the dream was just beginning. I looked at the phone and shook my head. Seriously? The getting dumped at the start of the apocalypse trope? I've seen this in 1,000 novels. Could the universe at least try to be a little more original? I'd seen this 1,000 times in stories. They call it cutting the first sword through the lover, once you've climbed the social ladder. I never thought I'd be the one on the receiving end. I let out a soft, dry laugh. The world was changing, and my high-class girlfriend hadn't realized her status was about to expire. I tapped the screen and sent back a single word. Okay. Across the city, in a luxury villa by Jianhua Lake, Chu Qingli stood behind her floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The rain blurred her reflection, but she looked conflicted, her fingers white from gripping her phone so hard. When it finally vibrated, she looked down. Okay. That was it. Her eyes trembled. She stared at that one word as if she could burn a hole through the screen, waiting for a follow-up, an argument, or even a plea. Nothing came. It was like dropping a pebble into the ocean. No splash, no ripples, just silence. She bit her lip so hard she left deep marks. Was I faking this calmness? Or did I really not care? She reopened the message again and again, her frustration growing. There was a coldness in that one word that she couldn't stand. With a sharp thwack, she threw her phone onto the sofa and stormed downstairs without looking back. The rain kept falling until the entire city felt like a soaked capsule, and then it finally tapered off. Back in my apartment, I didn't give my joke of an ex-girlfriend another thought. I walked into the living room and turned on the TV. It had been a long time since I'd watched the news, but now I listened closely. The midday broadcast was strange. In the coastal regions, fishermen had found supersized abalone. The reporter mentioned they looked like products of nuclear wastewater. An expert in a sharp suit sat in his office, speaking solemnly to the camera. The situation humanity faces right now is severe, the expert said. It's unprecedented. We can't look to history for solutions this time. We can only rely on ourselves to adapt to this new environment. I frowned. On the surface, it sounded like academic nonsense, but if you thought about it, it was terrifying. The reporter then mentioned that these giant abalones were being found inland too. The expert's advice? Residents should take protective measures at home. He didn't try to calm the public. He didn't deny the mutations. He just told people to watch out. To someone like me who knew what was coming, it was obvious. The government knew something, but they couldn't say it outright yet. They were giving the public a vaccination, preparing our minds for the impossible before the world truly broke. I flipped the channel. Same vibe. A famous scenic park was being closed because an ancient tree was growing too fast. Its roots covered 10 miles. The official excuse? Routine maintenance and excessive noise. I rubbed my chin. Maintenance? More like quarantine. They were sealing off the anomalies to keep the tourists safe without causing a mass panic. Every channel I hit told the same story. Cracks appearing in the earth. Giant vines hanging from the clouds with no visible source. Torn train tracks. The message was clear. Strange things are happening. Stay safe. In the past, news like this would have been suppressed or laughed off as a hoax. Now, it was everywhere. It was a classic strategy, leaking the truth slowly so that when the sky finally falls, people stay calm and look to the state for help. It was a lot more effective than the chaos happening in other countries. Then, a scrolling news ticker caught my eye. UV intensity at Qingbei campus far exceeds normal levels. New students are advised to take sun protection measures. Qingbei? I remembered my ex-girlfriend was heading there. Today was opening day for the freshmen. The thought flashed through my mind and vanished. More importantly, Qingbei was a landmark. It was easy to find by bus or subway. And compared to mutated animals or killer plants, strong sunlight sounded manageable. I just needed some sunscreen. I decided then and there. I was going to Qingbei. The next morning at 10 o'clock, I stood outside the north gate of the campus. The sun was brutal. My shadow was pinned to the ground, and the leaves on the trees above me looked like they were seconds away from turning to ash. I had my umbrella, my hat, and a thick layer of sunscreen, but I was still dripping sweat. I squinted up at the sky. It was insane. It felt like the sun had picked this one specific spot to dump all its fury. The ground was glowing, and the air was humming with heat. A security guard stepped out of his booth and gingerly pointed a temperature gun at the pavement. He looked at the reading and cursed. 74 degrees Celsius, he muttered, wiping his brow. I'm making 2,000 yuan a month, and I'm out here risking my life in this. I stood in the shade of a nearby milk tea shop and watched the gate. The sunlight hitting the ground created dazzling golden spots. The heat was so intense it felt like a physical weight, like being inside a giant furnace. But there was something wrong. The north gate was hot enough to melt shoes, but just a few yards past the entrance, inside the actual campus, everything looked completely normal. The apocalypse wasn't just coming. It was already here. The sun seemed to have a personal grudge against the north gate. Spiritual chi was recovering, and the world was changing. I, Feng Yi, knew exactly why this was happening. Suddenly, a mechanical voice echoed in my head. It detected a massive shift in the environment, a high concentration fluctuation of the sun attribute. The system gave me a mission: approach the area and touch the sunlight with my finger. If I gathered the data, I'd earn 50 writing points. I paused. Writing points? What were those? The system explained that I could use these points to forcibly write or implant data into anything. I didn't fully grasp what that meant yet, but I knew I needed those points. I had to try. I stood up and marched toward the north gate. Hey kid, stop, the security guard shouted, waving his arms frantically. Don't come over here. The heat is lethal. I've already asked the school to shut this gate down. Go around to the other side, or you'll get burned. I ignored him. The area was a ghost town. Not a single student was brave enough to be near the gate, but I kept walking. I reached the threshold and thrust my hand into the golden glare. The second my skin hit the light, my fingers turned a brilliant gold. Damn, I hissed, sucking in a sharp breath. It was scalding. My skin turned beet red and began to swell instantly. The pain was sharp, like needles being driven into my fingertips. But then, the voice returned. It confirmed the sun attribute fluctuation and began the ultimate calculation. In an instant, the golden light transformed. It became thousands of thin, shimmering threads that wrapped around my fingers and raced up my arm. The guard froze, his mouth hanging open. From his perspective, a waterfall of blinding solar radiance was pouring directly onto me. It was more dazzling than the sun in the sky. What the hell? He stammered, shielding his eyes. Is he a human sun? Inside my head, the system chimed again. The writing was successful. I had obtained a sun attribute technique, the golden sun breathing method. I didn't need to study it. The knowledge was simply there, unlocked in my mind. I opened my eyes, and I could feel a literal fire burning in my pupils. I gave the terrified guard a quick smile and activated the technique. Boom. Golden light surged toward me from every direction. The entire Qingbei campus glowed with a magnificent brilliance. I felt like a god standing in the heavens, commanding the sun itself. With every breath, the solar energy flooded my organs, washing away impurities and tempering my physical body. Black sludge seeped from my pores as my body underwent a violent transformation. It hurt. It felt like my bones were being crushed by a steamroller, but I couldn't even scream. I felt like I had stepped into the heart of the sun. Every cell in my body was being destroyed and rebuilt over and over again. I looked down at my arms. My blood wasn't just red anymore. It was laced with shimmering gold. Every vein and muscle was being infused with pure yang energy. I was becoming a living weapon of light. I was so lost in the sensation that I didn't notice the students in the nearby buildings staring out their windows in shock. What is that? Someone yelled. Suddenly, the world went dark. The sun seemed to vanish. Then, a second later, the light returned with a blinding flash. Then darkness again. Is the sun breathing? Someone whispered. The sky flickered between day and night, matching the rhythm of my lungs. When I inhaled, the world dimmed. When I exhaled, the light exploded. It was terrifying. Stray cats screamed and dived into the bushes for cover. Then, the heavy metal gate of the north gate groaned. The heat radiating from me was so intense that the steel began to liquefy, collapsing into a molten heap. The shrill blast of an alarm finally snapped me out of it. I blinked, looking at the absolute carnage around me. The ground looked like it had been hit by an artillery strike. I realized two things very quickly. 1. I did this. 2. I needed to get out of here before someone caught me. I turned and bolted. A few minutes later, I reached the south gate of Qingbei. It was a completely different world. Banners fluttered in the breeze and crowds of freshmen were checking in. Volunteers were scurrying around, trying to find new students from their departments. But everyone was distracted by one girl. She stood there with a cold, elegant aura that made people stop in their tracks. Her eyes were like peach blossoms, but they were filled with ice. Her long, flowing hair only added to her pure, untouchable vibe. Her name was Chu Qingli. She had just finished her registration and was standing alone, waiting for her luggage. I stood there at the south gate, watching the new couples nearby whispering and laughing together. Part of me wondered if I was missing out on romance, but I quickly shook the thought away. Chu Qingli, the girl I had become, let out a soft sigh. I knew that getting into Qingbei meant I had already secured half a successful life. Coming here meant cutting ties with everything from the past. Fang Yi's stoic face flashed in my mind. The moment our test results came out, we were destined for two different worlds. Now that we were broken up, the past was just smoke and dust. I was starting a new life, and I knew Fang Yi would only have held me back. I cleared my mind of the last lingering thoughts of him, straightened my back, and walked toward the campus. Then, a massive boom shook the ground. A blinding pillar of golden light erupted from the north gate. It looked like a sun had just been born on campus. The light poured down like a waterfall, soaking the trees and buildings in a brilliant hue, turning half the campus red. The quiet entrance was suddenly filled with an eerie, mysterious energy. Students everywhere stopped in their tracks, staring in shock. A girl with a ponytail ran up to me. She was a new friend I'd just met, someone with a decent temper who I got along with well. She was staring at the north gate too. The north gate? Is someone going crazy over there? She asked. Maybe another supernatural phenomenon, I whispered. These strange events were happening more and more lately. Giant mutated trees, pythons the size of small hills, and weird rain that had been falling in the south for months. It wasn't just here in China, it was happening all over the world. Beneath the calm surface of society, an undercurrent was moving, preparing for a world-changing shift. It was terrifying, but I couldn't help being curious. Let's go see, I said. Suddenly, the campus speakers crackled to life. High temperature warning for the North Gate area. Students are ordered to stay away. Do not approach. By the time I reached the North Gate, my brow furrowed at the sight. The heavy metal gates were literally melted. The ground was a spiderweb of cracks, looking like it had been ravaged by a massive fire. Rocks and soil had turned into a chaotic mess of cooling lava, radiating a heat so intense I didn't dare get closer. The air smelled scorched, stinging my eyes. Twisted metal fragments glowed in the dirt. It was horrific. They're calling this a high-temperature warning? Someone near me muttered. I'd believe it if you told me a volcano erupted here. 74 degrees? No way, another student chimed in. Not even an artillery strike looks this bad. I'm telling you, the world is changing. Haven't you seen the news lately? Everything we know is being flipped upside down. Can any genius explain why the sky went dark and then bright again? One guy asked. So it wasn't just me? I thought I was going blind for a second. The crowd was buzzing with confusion and fear. Then, a sharp, angry shout cut through the noise. What are you all doing here? The principal was marching toward us. Usually, he was a kind, grandfatherly figure, but now his voice was full of irritation and authority. Didn't you get the text? Stay away. Go report to your departments. Anyone who stays will have their credits docked. Everyone flinched. The principal rarely showed his face on campus, but what was scarier were the men behind him. They were dressed in military uniforms, radiating an aura that felt heavy and suffocating. Just looking at them made it hard to breathe. The crowd began to push and shove as we were forced away. The north gate was locked down and cordoned off, but those scars on the ground remained as proof that something supernatural had happened. I walked at the back of the line. Before I left, I caught a snippet of a whispered conversation from one of the men in uniform. It looks man-made, Someone who accessed spiritual chi early has appeared. Man-made. Spiritual chi? How could a single person cause this much destruction? My eyes scanned the nearby woods, and for a split second, I thought I saw a familiar figure, Feng Yi. I immediately shook my head. That was impossible. What would he be doing at Qingbei? Meanwhile, deep in a nearby park, the real Feng Yi, was moving fast. I didn't stop until I was sure my shadow couldn't be seen from the north gate. I leaned against a tree and wiped the cold sweat from my forehead. I had messed up. Big time. In this early stage where spiritual chi was just starting to recover, making this much noise was guaranteed to draw the attention of the authorities. Exposing myself this early wasn't smart, and I definitely hadn't planned on it. So I ran. I just hadn't expected the golden sun breathing technique to cause such a massive scene. I looked down at my body. I felt like a walking miniature sun. Golden light pulsed beneath my skin, and every breath I took released a wave of extreme heat. I looked terrifying. If anyone saw me right now, they'd probably film it and go viral in seconds. I feel like I'm overflowing with power, I whispered. I opened my palm, and a searing golden light flickered across my skin, following the lines of my hand like it was breathing. I felt reborn. The technique had filled every cell in my body with the most aggressive, pure yang energy. This rigid power was something ordinary cultivators would kill for, yet most could never achieve it. Even if the full recovery of spiritual chi hadn't started yet, this was a top-tier technique that only the most elite geniuses would have access to later on. And here I was, having finished my first body tempering with it already. I was miles ahead of everyone else. By the time I got back to my place, it was night. I grabbed some takeout, took a shower, and tried to head to bed before 9. It had been a long day of travel and chaos, and I didn't even have the energy to play games. But I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned for hours before finally sitting up with a sigh. The heat flowing through my veins made me feel wired and hyper-alert. I sat cross-legged and started the golden sun breathing technique again. The intense yang energy began to refine my internal organs, circulating through me with every breath. Asterisk buzz. 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 Asterisk. My lungs and heart were being washed by the golden light. As I breathed, I could actually hear the sound of my blood boiling and vibrating, a high-pitched hum echoing deep inside my chest. My blood was surging now, crashing through my veins like a tidal wave of fire. I felt my body tremble, not from fear, but from a raw, primal excitement. My physical form was evolving, tempered by the golden sun technique into something beyond human. I let out a long, heavy breath. A sharp light flickered in my eyes before fading. This breathing technique was the real deal. After only 2 sessions, the change was undeniable. My chronic stomach pain? Gone. In its place was a soothing, radiant warmth. I was officially a cultivator now. This was the path to a brilliant future, an evolution fueled by the most precious nutrient in the universe, spiritual chi. My old ailments had vanished, and I felt better than I ever had in my entire life. This is the power of evolution, I muttered to myself. The full recovery of spiritual chi hadn't even officially started yet. I couldn't imagine what the world would look like in a year. The average person's physical strength would probably reach levels that would leave modern science speechless. I tried to lie back down, but sleep was a lost cause. My mind was racing. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through the news. It was the same as before. The headlines were dominated by supernatural events and ghostly sightings. People were starting to notice the changes, and the theories were getting wild. Some blamed nuclear radiation. Others thought the government was testing secret weapons, and a few were convinced the world was ending. Then, something caught my eye. A trending topic. The Spiritual Cultivation Association updates realm rankings. I paused. I remembered this group. The Spiritual Cultivation Association had popped up about a year ago, posting random laws of cultivation. Back then, they released a guide called Cultivation Basics that caused a bit of a stir. Most people just treated it as a joke. Cultivation novels had been popular for years, so everyone assumed some obsessed fan was just role-playing a bit too hard. The hype had died down quickly when people realized the association's posts weren't as exciting as the novels they read. Only a few hundred true believers stayed in the forums, keeping the community on life support. I'd looked at their rules back when they were viral, and even as a skeptic, I thought they sounded surprisingly professional. Now, with all these strange phenomena happening, I felt a sudden urge to check it out. I clicked the link. The pinned post was the same cultivation manual I'd seen before. Heaven and Earth's spiritual chi is the root of all energy. It nourishes all living things. It went on with some cryptic philosophy, basically saying chi is rare and you need the correct method to absorb it if you want to get anywhere. The logic was sound, but it didn't explain what that correct method actually was. To a normal person, this was less helpful than just sitting in your living room at 3 a.m. trying to soak up the moon. That's why the association had faded into obscurity. I kept scrolling, my thumb practically smoking from how fast I was swiping through old posts. Finally, I found it. The post that had everyone talking. Details on the realms of cultivators. I tapped it. The layout was simple, blue background, white text. At the top was the association's logo, and in the bottom right, there was a date and a formal signature. It looked like an official government document. I squinted at the screen. There was a watermark. A national certification watermark. I stared at it for a long time. Knowing that the spiritual chi recovery was real, my first thought wasn't fake. It was, is this actually from the government? Was this association a way for the state to send a signal to those of us who had already started sensing the chi? Beginners always take the wrong path. Without a teacher or a proper manual, it's too easy to suffer a chi deviation and ruin your body. I looked at the official seal at the bottom of the post. In our country, faking a national watermark is a serious crime. The authorities would have shut this down in minutes if it were a prank. But here it was, loud and proud. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I scrolled down to the comments. No way, they're actually making rank levels now? One user wrote, is this a novel coming to life? I'm already practicing, brothers. Don't wait for me. Another joked. Guys, my pigpen literally exploded last night for no reason. I think it's supernatural. I need to join the association so I can learn a move to catch my runaway pigs. The guy above me has some big dreams, someone replied. Netizens were always looking for a laugh, even when faced with something this serious. I ignored the jokes and clicked the main attachment, a simple chart. Realm 1, Ghost Axe. Realm 2, Spirit Creation. Realm 3, Vajra. Realm 4, Divine Moon. Realm 5, Rising Sunday. Realm 6, Lucky Star. Realm 7, Peaceful Gloom. Realm 8, King. I hissed through my teeth. It looked legit. I scrolled down for the descriptions. Realm 1, Ghost Axe. Using the divine craftsmanship of heaven and earth's chi to forge a human weapon. This realm has no threshold and requires no special talent. Anyone can reach it with persistence. Forge the body into a human weapon? I whispered. I sat up and activated the golden sun breathing technique. As the heat surged, I focused my mind. Under the guidance of the technique, the chi inside me felt fierce and powerful, like a dragon crashing through my chest. It was scorching and ancient. The first step of cultivation was to temper the flesh into a weapon that could hold the energy of the world. And the very first part of that, learning to control the chi to carve the body. I tried to move the energy, but my control was clunky and stiff. I had the power, but I needed to learn how to wield the axe. Soon, I felt the spiritual chi twisting and gathering in my mind like a coiling dragon. It condensed, sharpening into a solid form. Suddenly, it felt as if the shackles on my body snapped. A spectral projection of a divine axe, flowing with molten lava, slowly materialized within me. The chaotic energy in my gut went silent. A surge of power, unlike anything I'd ever felt, washed over me. It was a complete transformation. With the world on the brink of a spiritual awakening, everyone else was fumbling in the dark, but my golden sun breathing technique had carved out a bright path for me. I doubted anyone else could break through this easily. My divine axe looked different from the descriptions. It shimmered with a brilliant, flowing gold, likely an effect of the golden sun technique. Stepping into the ghost axe realm was just the start. According to the post, I had to use my chi to drive the axe. Each time the axe swung down, my level would increase by 1 star. Right now, even using every ounce of my strength, I could only manage a single swing. I whispered to myself, realizing there were 9 stars in the Ghost Axe realm. Each swing demanded massive mental and physical energy. My blood roared in anticipation. The axe hummed. The energy in my gut boiled. I forced it to fall. 1 star. That was my current level. The sheer power of the Golden Sun technique was on full display. The moment I touched the axe, a searing heat scorched my soul. Golden light pulsed across my skin, flickering like a dying flame before roaring back to life. I felt like a miniature sun. My blood, tempered by the technique, surged through me. Every cell, every muscle, vibrated in harmony. It felt like a veil was being lifted from a hidden world. A low groan escaped my throat as the heat flowed into my limbs. It felt incredible. I wondered what would happen if I activated the technique again now that I'd broken through. Previously, I was using a god-tier technique on a mortal body. It was like putting a high-performance engine in a junk car. The power was there, but the frame couldn't handle it. Now it was different. The power flowed like a boiling river through my veins. My skin emitted a faint golden glow. From the tips of my hair to my fingernails, I felt an intimidating strength. I had finally achieved internal balance. It had only been 1 day since I started. In 24 hours, I had reached the 1st star of the 1st realm. It sounded like bragging, but my cultivation speed was terrifying. I had to give credit to that Spiritual Cultivation Association. Their timing was perfect. Everyone else was crossing the river by feeling the stones, but this post gave me a bridge. It saved me a massive amount of time. If the 1st realm was about forging the body with an axe, what came next? I scrolled down. The 2nd realm was spirit creation. It involved using a body tempered 9 times by the axe to create internal spiritual energy. It sounded difficult, requiring precise control that I hadn't mastered yet. The 3rd realm was the Vajra realm, where internal chi connected the 5 senses and all meridians. I kept scrolling. The descriptions got shorter the further down I went. When I reached the 8th realm, the King realm, there was only 1 sentence. Use the gloom as the core, harness the power of the sun, moon, and stars to stand between heaven and earth, hold the universe in your palm, and sit upon the throne of the world. My heart skipped a beat. Images flashed in my mind, sitting on a throne above a vast, dark abyss, shattering mountains and reversing rivers with a wave of my hand. That kind of power transcended rules. It wasn't just a cultivator, that was a god. Holy crap, I muttered. My blood was pumping. I reached the bottom of the thread. There was one comment that stood out. Thank you for the guidance. The replies to that comment were brutal. People called the guy a lunatic and told him to check into a psychiatric ward. Others told him to grow up and focus on real life. Not a single person believed it. They just mocked and pointed fingers. I had a different take. That commenter was likely an early bird like me, someone who had already seen results. I felt a bit sorry for the trolls. A year from now, when the veil finally lifts, the people they're laughing at will be the ones they fear. I felt refreshed, every pore in my body humming with energy. I was ready to sleep, but then I remembered a new system feature I hadn't checked yet. I opened my panel and saw a small number in the corner, 50 script points. I frowned. What were these for? I'd been so focused on writing the breathing technique that I hadn't explored the interface. I looked at the description. It was simple. Script points can be used to forcibly instill written data into any object. I stared at the screen. This felt like a gateway to something even more broken than creating techniques. But what did instill mean? My eyes drifted to a glass mug on my desk. Asterisk instill sun attribute into this object. Cost, 10 script points. A notification popped up. I grinned. It wasn't just instilling, it was enchanting. If I clicked yes, this ordinary glass would become a supernatural item. This realization hit me like a lightning bolt. A glass mug was useless, but what if I used this on a weapon? A knife, a gun, or even a simple blade? If I instilled the sun attribute into a sword, the power would be devastating. Scorch and destruction would weave together on the edge of the blade, crushing enemies in a single heartbeat. My mind raced. I needed a weapon that fit me perfectly. If I crafted one and then used my script points to bond it with the power of the sun, I'd have a custom-made tool of destruction. It would be leagues beyond anything available on the market. I pulled out my phone and opened a shopping app. After scrolling through specialized blade shops, one caught my eye immediately. It was a Tang Dynasty straight sword. The blade was nearly 4 feet long, broad and powerful. The hilt was crafted from dark sandalwood, simple, unadorned, but elegant. A touch of gold accented the pommel, topped with a single, translucent white pearl. It wasn't sharpened, but it looked incredibly sharp. It was perfect. I tapped the buy button. The delivery estimate said it would arrive tomorrow. Talk about efficiency. With that settled, the exhaustion finally caught up to me. I yawned, stretched my limbs, and collapsed into my soft bed. While I drifted off, a figure in a dark silver uniform was sprinting through the city's night. She moved with an agility that defied human limits, her eyes glowing with a faint silver light like a forest spirit. She was hunting. Her earpiece flickered with blue light as she spoke. "I still haven't caught the rabbit that swallowed the night spirit fruit," she whispered. "Its speed is insane." She leaped over an apartment building, her silhouette tracing a beautiful arc against the crescent moon like a falling star. A pedestrian looked up, rubbing their eyes, wondering if they'd just seen a person fly over a high-rise. A lively female voice crackled through her earpiece. "Be careful. It just consumed the fruit. The mutation isn't complete yet, which means it could still get stronger. Don't let your guard down." "I understand," the girl replied softly. She looked toward the shadows where the creature had vanished. The era of spiritual chi recovery was beginning. It was a time of opportunity, but also of extreme danger. The changing world was birthing pioneers, but it was also creating monsters. This rabbit was one of them. Having eaten the fruit, it could move perfectly through the shadows. It was aggressive and dangerous. If it reached a crowded area, the body count would be high. The girl, Su Qingying, suddenly frowned. The scent she was tracking had veered off. It had bolted straight into a high-rise apartment complex. "Damn it," she hissed. "It's in a residential zone." She vanished into the darkness. Back in my room, I was just about to fall asleep when I heard a bizarre noise. It was messy and chaotic, like a nest of rats having a wild party under my bed. "What the hell?" I muttered. I thought I was hallucinating. I'd lived here for years and never had a rodent problem. I rolled over, trying to ignore it, but the sound got louder. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It sounded like they were reaching a climax of some filthy business. I couldn't take it. I snapped the light on and kicked off my blanket. I searched every corner of the room in my slippers, but I found nothing. "Maybe it's a neighbor's pet," I grumbled. My hearing and vision had sharpened significantly since I reached the Ghost Act's realm. It wasn't strange to hear things from other apartments. I went back to bed, and for a moment, it was quiet. But just as I started to dream, a piercing shriek tore through the silence. This wasn't just a squeak. It was a shrill, agonizing sound, like nails dragging across a chalkboard. My brow furrowed. I was done. "Shut the hell up," I growled. The hallway was cold and silent, smelling of stale air. I stepped out of my room, my skin radiating a fierce heat that the night breeze couldn't touch. In the dark corridor, I was like a walking furnace, glowing with a faint, inner light. I followed the sound until I found the culprit. It was a rabbit. It was huddled in a corner, trembling, radiating an aura of pure pain. But as I got closer, the smell hit me. It was a pungent, metallic stench. I narrowed my eyes. This thing wasn't a pet. It was pitch black, with jagged fangs protruding from a mouth that looked far too large for its head. Its eyes were blood red, glowing with a savage light. Its fur was matted and stiff, sticking out like steel needles. Under the dim emergency lights, it looked twisted and demonic. "Man, you are ugly," I whispered. The creature let out a raspy hiss. Its eyes locked onto me. A sudden flicker of the overhead light revealed red liquid dripping from its jaw. Blood. My heart sank. This thing was a mutated beast. It wasn't fully evolved yet, but it was already predatory. The night, a tribute, was fueling its madness. If I didn't stop it now, people in this building were going to die. I didn't hesitate. I started walking toward it. The rabbit bristled, its needle-like fur standing on end. It hissed and roared, trying to intimidate me. But the golden glow beginning to circulate beneath my skin carried a divine, overwhelming pressure. Deep down, the beast was terrified. It knew it was facing something it couldn't fight. The standoff between man and beast felt heavy. The creature was terrified of my lean, quiet figure. Just as it let out a final, desperate howl, I moved. Golden light exploded from my palms like 10,000 suns blooming at once. A majestic, surging energy rippled through the air. I was draped in a terrifying, pure radiance, the essence of the sun itself. I threw a punch. The sound hit like a crack of thunder. Golden ripples blasted outward, shredding the air. A bloody hole punched straight through the rabbit's chest. A second later, its body disintegrated. Flesh and fur sprayed everywhere, but each piece shimmered with golden light, looking like shards of shattered jewelry. One of its eyeballs flew out and landed near my feet. Even in death, that eye was wide with confusion and pure terror. It never understood why the human in front of it was so monstrously powerful. I looked down at the eye with cold indifference. Snap! I stepped on it. Thick gore splattered under my boot like a crimson flower blooming in the dark. I knew exactly what had happened. Even though the rabbit had gained the night attribute, its mutation wasn't finished. My solar energy was its natural enemy. That single punch had unleashed a burst of pure heat that vaporized it instantly. I had only been cultivating for one day, yet I could already one-shot a mutated beast. Even if it was an incomplete one, I was satisfied. Stupid animal. No manners at all. Waking people up in the middle of the night, I muttered. I let out a long yawn. It had been a long day, and I was exhausted. I turned around lazily, not sparing a second glance at the mess on the floor, and headed back to my room. Shortly after I left, a shadow flickered outside the window. A pair of long legs stepped quickly into the hallway. Su Qingying had arrived, hoping to intercept the rabbit before it hurt anyone. She rushed in, but her pupils shrank. The floor was covered in minced meat and blood. There wasn't a single piece of the corpse left intact, just bone fragments and a pulpy mess. It was dead. Her heart raced. The rabbit carried a trace of the night attribute, a rare subpower of darkness that she needed to collect for its high value. But as she got closer, she froze. Her brow furrowed. "Wait, this heat," she whispered. It was fierce, righteous, and incredibly powerful. It wasn't a sub-attribute. It was a peak-level solar attribute. Su Qingying's expression turned complicated. As the spiritual qi returned to the world, attribute users were appearing. Since there were no official training manuals yet, these early pioneers usually gained powers based on natural phenomena. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were common. But lightning, sun, and darkness? Those were rare and dangerous. Such pure solar energy, she noted. The recovery level has to be at least 80%. This person is a genius. Based on the lingering aura, the person was only at the first star of the Ghost Axe realm. She tapped her earpiece and dialed her superiors immediately. "Report. The rabbit is dead." "Good work," a voice crackled back. "Did you kill it?" "No. Someone else got here first." Su Qingying quickly described the scene. The other end of the line went silent. It felt like time had stopped. After a long moment, the supervisor spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you saying there's a high-level attribute pioneer at your location?" "Yes," Su Qingying said, staring at the meat on the floor. Faint golden sparks still flickered in the gore. "There's no record of him in the headquarters files. A talent like that, we have to find him," the supervisor said, sounding excited. "He's easily among the top tier of geniuses in the country. Any organization would drown him in resources just to get him to join." The orders came down instantly. "Drop your current mission. Your primary task now is to stay there and find this pioneer. Record everything. And if possible, convince him to join the Spiritual Cultivation Association." "Understood," Su Qingying whispered. She looked at the remains of the rabbit one last time. Who was this guy? The next morning, the sun was bright and a cool breeze drifted through my window. I had slept like a log. I woke up early and sat by the window to start my training. They say the best time of day is the morning, and for someone using a sun-based technique, the dawn was my best friend. Some cultivators do crazy things to get an edge, practicing under a scorching noon sun or standing in a lightning storm. It works, though. Visualizing the sun helped my golden sun breathing technique run faster. I watched the sunrise, breathing in the crisp morning air. As I entered the meditative state, the internal view of my body became even more grand. Inside my spirit palace, the giant ghost axe sat beneath a flowing, golden sun. The energy from my breathing moved like golden silk threads, wrapping around the handle of the axe like tiny, soaring dragons. As the threads multiplied, they formed a sort of web, lifting the massive axe. Then, the threads tightened. They pulled. The axe, which felt as heavy as a mountain, shifted. It began to swing downward. I felt a surge of joy. To level up in the ghost axe realm, you have to swing the axe. Each successful swing marks a new star of power. But swinging it drains your mental energy. If you aren't prepared, you can actually injure yourself. I'm at the threshold of the second star. I realized. The axe didn't feel as heavy as it did yesterday. I was like a woodcutter. The first time I picked up the tool, I could only manage one swing. But with practice, I'd manage two, then three. It was all about persistence. Of course, the Golden Sun technique was the real hero here. Without a high-level manual to guide the energy, I could practice for 100 years and get nowhere. I pushed. I channeled every bit of golden light I had, wrapping it around the axe head. The energy felt like boiling lava. With a roar that echoed only in my mind, the axe fell. It carved a scorching black trail through the air, radiating intense heat. One swing. Two swings. I had officially broken through to the 2-star Ghost Axe realm. I broke through to 1-star yesterday, and today I'm already at 2-star. This leveling speed was terrifying. I exhaled a long breath of scorching air. If someone looked at me from the outside right now, they'd see faint, eerie golden veins glowing beneath my skin. It was the effect of the Golden Sun breathing technique. My blood had been transformed into a vast, pure sea of molten gold. I knew why I was moving so fast. When I broke through the first star, I felt like I had energy left over. I wasn't starting from zero today, but from here on out, I'd have to stay grounded and take it step by step. If other practitioners heard me say that, they'd probably cough up blood in frustration. Reaching 2-star Ghost Axe in just 2 days? It defied all logic. This was the raw power of a top-tier cultivation manual. Ordinary techniques took longer and gave back less. With every star I gained, my physical body felt exponentially stronger. I clenched my fist, feeling a surge of raw power. Before, I could probably knock out a kid with one punch. Now, even a professional bodybuilder wouldn't stand a chance against me. That was the hidden benefit of leveling up. My physical shell was becoming an impenetrable fortress. I could feel the yang attribute chi surging around my spirit palace, lush and overflowing. My energy was already pure, but after this tempering, it was flawless. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table. A delivery? I answered the call and headed for the door. A courier was standing there with a package. Usually, they just leave things in the smart lockers these days, so getting a door-to-door delivery felt like a rare luxury. I signed for it, feeling my mood lift. Inside the box lay a sleek tang sword. I remembered my experiment with the mug. If I touched an object, I could forcibly implant an attribute into it. I pressed my palm against the cold steel of the blade. A prompt appeared in my mind. Consume coding points to implant yang attribute into this item? Yes. Boom. Golden light erupted, wrapping around the sword. It felt like I was staring directly at the sun. Unlike fire, which just burns, the yang attribute represents extreme, concentrated heat. You can look at a torch, but you can't look at the sun without being blinded. With one glance, this energy could incinerate a soul. The process was a success. I gripped the hilt and felt an instant connection. The sword and the power in my body were born from the same source. They were perfectly in sync. Even though the blade wasn't sharpened yet, it felt deadlier than any razor. In the future, battles between cultivators wouldn't just be about steel hitting steel. They would be about the energy behind the strike. I wanted to test it. I headed to the back mountain, a quiet spot usually reserved for couples looking for privacy. I drew the tang sword. As I swung, a flash of golden light obliterated the dust in the air. The sky seemed to ignite. It was as if a miniature sun was burning right there, melting everything in its path. My eyes widened. My first thought was, that was too close. I was lucky I came to this deserted spot. The commotion was way too loud. If anyone had seen that, they'd probably report me for trying to start a forest fire. I quickly sheathed the sword and looked around. It was work hours, and the mountain was empty. I turned and vanished. I didn't realize that shortly after I left, a shadow rushed to the spot where I'd been standing. Su Qingying stood on the plateau, clutching a cup of milk tea. She looked around, her face turning red with anger. Damn it, he got away again. She had stayed up all night watching the apartment, only leaving for 5 minutes to grab a drink. She bit her straw viciously. Based on her experience in criminal investigation, suspects almost always returned to the scene of the crime. She had waited by the stairs where the corpse had been found, but all she saw was a crying kid who was late for school. I hate overtime, she sighed. Then, her eyes caught something on the ground. She froze. The rooftop was covered in golden residue. Even though the energy was fading, the light still made her eyes sting. A few potted flowers nearby had been roasted to a crisp, smelling of charred earth. The ground looked like it had been draped in a veil of golden silk. Again? He left another mess for me to clean up, she groaned. As a member of the spiritual association, her job was to keep the public calm. The government was trying a slow-boil approach, leaking news of the chi recovery slowly so people wouldn't panic. But this guy? He was making her life a nightmare. She knelt down to inspect the tracks, and her pupils shrunk. Impossible. Last night, his aura was barely at 1-star ghost axe. How did it get this much stronger in one day? But that wasn't the most shocking part. She looked at the scorched marks on the ground. There was a trace of something else, something legendary. A spirit weapon? She whispered. That's impossible. Spirit weapons were extremely rare. Even the entire association only had 1 or 2, and they were still in the experimental phase. It was a technology that existed mostly in theory, implanting raw attributes into a blade to make it 100 times more powerful than ordinary steel. She stared at the golden ruins, her heart racing. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't just a practitioner. He was a monster. Technology was still limited, and frozen ice hadn't been fully released by the association yet. So how was it here? Su Qingying paced back and forth, chewing on her straw in a nervous frenzy. She couldn't understand how a rogue practitioner could possess something the association could barely manufacture. She wanted to go down there. Part of her wanted to kick in doors, find this mysterious sun attribute, user, and demand answers. But she couldn't. The first rule of the spiritual association was absolute: never disturb the lives of civilians. It was a sacred code for every pioneer of the chi recovery. Our country is massive. The upcoming shift in the world was already a ticking time bomb for social stability. One wrong move, one moment of public panic, and the whole system would collapse. If chaos met the changing world, it wouldn't be a new era, it would be the apocalypse. That was why Su Qingying was stuck playing cat and mouse. She sighed, giving up for now. She couldn't report something this big without more proof. She started cleaning up the golden mess I'd left behind, resigning herself to her job. Back in my apartment, I sat on the sofa, taking stock of my gains. I had reached the 2-star ghost axe realm. My tang blade now carried the sun attribute. I felt a massive surge in my overall power. For a cultivator, getting a hand-fitted weapon early on was a game changer. But I was already thinking about the next step. I wondered if I could stack attributes on a single item. Right now, my blade only had the sun attribute. If I visualized and gained other powers, could I graft them into the steel as well? I knew I wouldn't stop at just one element. If I collected enough, I wouldn't just have a god-tier blade. I could enchant my clothes, my gear, maybe even a pet. Everything would be tailor-made for me, perfectly synced with my soul. I lay back, my thumb absent-mindedly clicking the power button on my phone. Suddenly, it vibrated. A notification popped up. You have a new reply. I opened it. I remembered this guy. He was the one who had commented, "I've learned a lot," on that official post yesterday, only to get mocked by the internet trolls. I had given his comment a like while scrolling. Now he was sliding into my DMs. "Are you a pioneer too?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't confirm anything. "Are you?" I typed back. He replied almost instantly. "Yes." His profile was bare. His nickname was just a string of system-generated characters. It tugs 72. He seemed convinced I was one of them. He sent a flurry of messages. "I've been watching your browsing history. You're very focused on the recent natural anomalies. Plus, you liked my comment yesterday. I'm betting you're a pioneer too. I have a few friends. We're all pioneers. We get together to discuss things. We're always looking for others like us." I frowned. I didn't reply yet. Instead, I went straight into my privacy settings and hid my browsing history and activity. The world was changing, and there were too many unknown players in the shadows. I had to be careful. Once I was ghosted, I went back to the chat. "What do you want?" I asked. The typing bubble flickered for a long time. "Honestly, we just want to make friends. There are 3 of us. We've stayed together for warmth since the world started changing. It's common among pioneers. We have a feeling big problems are coming. It's better to have allies." The guy seemed surprisingly honest. I'd never seen someone spill their guts, and their friends' guts, so quickly to a stranger. "I'm a newbie too," I replied. "Oh, a newbie." He seemed relieved. "That takes the pressure off. We can all learn together. If you don't understand something, just ask. I'll tell you everything I know." "Thanks," I wrote. "Did you see the association's realm chart? How's your cultivation going?" I was actually going to tell you about that. "Man, that ghost axe thing? I tried to condense it yesterday. I put every ounce of strength I had into it, but it's so damn hard. Out of the 3 of us, only one guy succeeded. Pretty impressive, right?" I smiled. "Very impressive. To be honest, I don't think many people can do it yet. Anyone who can step into the 1-star ghost axe realm right now is a total monster. A freak of nature." "I see." I typed, keeping my 2-star status to myself. "I've got some inside info," he continued. "The government has a lot of pioneers on their payroll. Most of them are only at 1-star ghost axe. Basically, we're right behind the national team." "So the elite government forces were only at 1-star? I processed this. I pushed for a bit more info and realized he was telling the truth. He was sincere, if a bit talkative. "By the way," he messaged, "more inside info. I found a special location where a massive world change is happening. Do you want to come? If it works out, maybe we can form a permanent team." I hesitated for a second. "Sure. Send me the address." I needed intelligence. Many pioneers were hunting for these anomalies now. They were the ones who would benefit most from the era, hunting for treasures or attribute-aligned materials to boost their strength. He sent over a file. It was a compressed folder. Inside was a detailed map, photos, and a 5,000-word research paper he'd written. He had analyzed the local geography, history, and the progression of the changes. He concluded there was definitely treasure hidden there. I clicked on the first photo. It was a dark, underground river. But the water wasn't clear. It was burning. The river had turned into a flow of molten lava, glowing a fierce crimson gold against the black rock of the cavern. It was a masterpiece of the world's awakening. The underground river had transformed into a searing fire dragon. It glowed with a fierce, blinding light, but I noticed something else. Tiny specks of gold sparkled within the crimson flow like fragments of sunlight trapped in the current. It was striking. My own energy was yang attributed, and I could tell immediately that this phenomenon was special. I knew right then that this trip would be worth my time. A day later, I arrived at a clearing in the woods within the Binmu district of Tai City. A stone door was set into the rocky cliffside, and waves of intense heat rolled out from the cracks in the seal. A group of young men and women stood waiting. All of them were pioneers with elemental attributes. The strongest among them was at the 1-star ghost axe realm. They were huddled around a girl in white hiking gear. She seemed to be their leader. Her name was Zhang Xiaoya. She was the one who had created the data file and discovered this underground lava flow. But she had a secret. Not long ago, she had successfully joined the Spiritual Cultivation Association as an official employee. Very few people knew that the association was actually a high-level government department. The entry requirements were incredibly steep. Most pioneers couldn't even find the front door, let alone get in. Zhang Xiaoya had used every bit of her ability and pulled quite a few favors to land that spot. "Xiaoya, the map you shared was so detailed," someone said, trying to get on her good side. "I found the place without any trouble at all." Zhang Xiaoya gave a polite, faint smile. "I should thank all of you for coming to explore this river with me. Once we're inside, we'll need to look out for each other." Of course," the group chimed in. Nearby, a man with a small mustache kept checking his phone. He looked anxious. This was Old Lee, the guy I'd messaged. "Old Lee, where's that friend of yours?" someone asked. "It's almost time." "He'll be here," Old Lee said, glancing at his screen again. He said 10 o'clock. There's still 2 minutes left. A short, chubby guy with a buzz cut nudged Old Lee's arm. "This internet friend of yours." Is he actually coming? You've never even met him. Is he reliable? I don't know, Oldly muttered. Let's just wait 5 minutes. He sent out a quick message to my handle. Asterisk, are you here yet? We're at the entrance waiting. Asterisk. Zhang Xiaoya watched them, shaking her head slightly. When she organized this, she had hoped to find some elite pioneers she could scout for the association. Now, looking at this disorganized bunch, she felt she was wasting her time. He's here, Oldly suddenly shouted, waving his hand toward the trees. Everyone turned at once. A figure stepped slowly out of the woods. I walked toward them with a steady pace. I looked young, probably not even 20, with a straight, tall build. A tang sword hung at my waist, giving me an air of sharp, quiet intensity. I reached the stone door exactly as my phone hit 10 a.m. Not a second early, not a second late. Your brother Lin? Oldly blinked, looking me up and down. I was much younger than he expected. He probably thought I'd be in my late 20s like him. I'm the one you messaged, I said with a thin smile. I gave a brief nod and then stepped to the side, falling silent. Looks like we've got another introvert, the chubby guy joked, trying to break the ice. Not like me. I'm basically a social terrorist. I can talk to anyone. Zhang Xiaoya couldn't help but stare at me. She sensed that my strength was decent, but my cold, distant personality made it hard for her to approach me. Since everyone is here, let's head down, she announced. She pushed against the stone door. With a heavy groan, it swung open. A brilliant golden light poured out from the darkness. As the gap widened, a wall of heat slammed into us. Everyone started sweating instantly, but their eyes were filled with a frantic kind of excitement. A new era was coming. This was their chance. Zhang Xiaoya's fingers trembled. Was this a lucky break or a death trap? She was about to find out. I just stared at the golden light. It was definitely yang energy. Let's go, I said. We entered the cavern. The underground river flowed through a massive cave system filled with jagged stalactites and strange rock formations. It was a twisted, beautiful landscape. As we moved deeper, the natural light faded. Someone switched on a flashlight, illuminating a rugged, narrow path flanked by steep cliffs. The enclosed space felt heavy and suffocating. Who wants to take the lead? Zhang Xiaoya asked. Old Li and the chubby guy looked at each other, their mouths suddenly clamped shut. I'll do it, I said. I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped past Zhang Xiaoya and took the front of the line. My back was steady, my movements calm. Seeing me step up gave Zhang Xiaoya a sudden sense of security. I'll hold the light and follow right behind you, she said. The rest of you figure it out. The line formed. Old Li took the rear. As we walked, Zhang Xiaoya kept her eyes on my back. She felt a sense of mystery coming from me. It wasn't just that I was quiet, it was my aura. Most pioneers she knew were arrogant and loud. I wasn't. In fact, she felt a strange, warm energy radiating from me. It was comforting and intimidating at the same time. Brother Lin, slow down a bit, someone called from the back. Watch the loose rocks. Stay close to the wall. I think the ceiling is dripping over there. They kept chatting, trying to keep the mood light. They were talkative, friendly, and clearly looking for teammates they could trust in this changing world. I realized then that Old Li wasn't just being pushy online. He was genuinely looking for a connection. We're almost there, I said suddenly. The lava, Zhang Xiaoya cried out. We reached the heart of the cavern. The scene was even more incredible than the photos. A massive tunnel opened up, and a river of churning, crimson lava flowed through it. White steam hissed as the molten rock hit the cave walls, sounding like waves crashing against a shore. It's real lava, someone whispered in awe. If we posted this, people would say it's photoshopped. Is it just me, or is it not that hot? The chubby guy asked. I mean, we're sweating, but we shouldn't be able to stand this close to literal lava. It was true. The heat was manageable. While they were busy debating why, I walked to the edge of the flow. I knelt down and, without a word, plunged my hand directly into the boiling, golden-red river. The group screamed in horror as the lava swallowed my arm. Are you crazy? That's the flame river. Zhang Xiaoya's voice was sharp with panic, her breath hitching as she watched me. Old Li lunged forward, trying to grab my arm before it dissolved in the molten rock. But before he could reach me, I pulled my hand back out. My palm was perfectly smooth. There wasn't a single blister or even a trace of a burn. It's not that hot, I said calmly. This river is strange. To prove my point, I thrust my hand back in, deeper this time. Finally, I felt it, a sharp, stinging heat. It felt like tiny fire snakes were licking my fingertips, needles of warmth piercing my skin. The surface was cool, but the core was boiling. It was as if fire was burning inside the water itself. As I was processing this, a massive jolt of survival instinct spiked in my chest. A sense of overwhelming danger washed over me. I didn't hesitate. I yanked my hand back with everything I had. Boom. The spot where my hand had been just a second ago exploded. A blinding pillar of fire erupted, roaring into a massive blaze. A violent heat wave slammed into us, nearly knocking us off our feet. The flame river met the air and let out a deafening, thunderous howl. Molten rocks splashed everywhere, turning everything it touched into gray ash. The flames danced like a giant dragon, and for a moment, it felt like the very earth was screaming in rage. What happened? The group scrambled back, faces pale and eyes wide. They had almost been caught in the blast. If that explosion had hit them, their heads would have been wiped off the map instantly. I stepped back too, my eyes fixed on the sparks dancing in the air. Inside my mind, my vision flickered with lines of code. Asterisk natural phenomenon detected. Internal flame analysis in progress. Ultimate computing power activated. Asterisk. Asterisk coding complete. You have obtained red fire blade technique. Asterisk. Asterisk internal flame material template acquired. High internal temperature. Explosive properties. Destructive power. Immense. Asterisk. This was different from the golden sun breathing technique. To see the true power of the red fire blade, I needed to draw my weapon. Every strike would carry the roar of the flames. Every swing would be a bolt of lightning made of fire. When active, the blade would be coated in a raging inferno, and the heat concentrated at the tip would explode based on my battle intent. At that moment, the energy released would be like the scorching heat of a dying sun. My eyes brightened. This technique was the perfect match for my Tang blade. I could fuse this internal flame attribute directly into the weapon to multiply its power. Consume coding points to inject internal flame attribute into the item? Yes, I whispered. In an instant, thousands of crimson streaks of light flooded into the Tang blade hanging at my side. Inside the scabbard, tiny cracks appeared on the steel. Glowing bubbles of heat hissed off the surface of the metal. As the internal flame settled in, ripple-like fire patterns began to flow across the blade. A bright flash surged through the hilt, and I could feel the energy coiled inside, ready to ignite the very air around me. The higher my cultivation realm, the stronger the explosion. In the hands of a true master, this blade could level a city. It was violent. It was brutal. I felt the warmth radiating from the scabbard and smiled. I liked it. I feel it. I feel it too. The guy with the buzz cut shouted, his face full of joy. I just need a little more time to practice, and I can officially start my cultivation journey. The others had already sat down cross-legged on the ground. They had felt the surge of spiritual energy from the explosion and didn't want to waste a single second. We were all pioneers, but in this world, the only thing that mattered was who grew faster. I didn't join them. I had already gained something far more valuable than a bit of loose chi. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound. It was quiet, muffled by the distance, but it was getting closer. The three people training were too deep in their meditation to notice, but my senses were sharp. I looked toward the tunnel entrance. Looks like we aren't the only ones who found this place. Outside the stone forest, a group of people stood on the scorched earth. Their auras were restrained, but powerful. They were clearly pioneers. They stood by the stone gate, checking maps on their phones. The world is changing fast, one of them said. We need to get in there before someone else steals the opportunity. The phenomenon should be right below us. I can feel the vibration. Let's go. Every resource found before the full recovery is priceless. Don't stall. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing explosion echoed from deep underground. A wave of heat poured out of the stone gate like a melting sun had just burst. A red wave of energy slithered out of the earth like a snake. The newcomers froze, their pupils shrinking. Such a strong vibration. Has someone already taken it? They traded looks and rushed through the gate. When they arrived at the cavern, they saw our group immediately. Their faces darkened, eyes turning cold and predatory. In this new era, fights over Great Change locations were common. Every spot held the potential for transcendence, and nobody wanted to share. The atmosphere turned electric. "We found this place first," the buzzcut guy said, standing up to shield me, and oldly. "My friends are already absorbing the chi. Why don't you guys find somewhere else?" "Who's your guy?" one of the newcomers sneered. "A piece of trash who hasn't even reached the Ghost Axe realm isn't fit to speak to us." He took a step forward, and a powerful aura erupted from him. He was a one-star Ghost Axe realm cultivator. Another man stepped up behind him, a giant, nearly 2 meters tall, standing like a brick wall. He was also one-star Ghost Axe. The buzzcut guy's face went pale. In our group, only Zhang Xiaoya had reached 1 star. He and Oldly weren't there yet, and I was a newcomer who looked like I didn't know anything. We were outnumbered and outclassed. In this world, a fast tongue is nothing compared to a hard fist. Understand now? Then get lost, the 1-star leader mocked. He didn't even look at us as he started walking toward the lava, treating us like we were invisible. Zhang Xiaoya trembled with rage. She knew we couldn't win. This was the law of the jungle. The strong take what they want, and the weak get crushed. Pioneers were like alpha predators. They didn't rule through kindness, but through the strength of the bodies they left behind. She bit her lip and stepped forward, ready to argue, even if it was hopeless. Just as Zhang Xiaoya was about to step forward, a figure moved past her. It was me. I didn't say a word as I walked calmly into the empty space between the two groups. The evening wind caught my hair, making it flutter. My skin began to hum with a strange, high-pitched resonance. In the dim light, a faint starlight seemed to wrap around my body, though it looked so ethereal it could have been an illusion. I reached back. My hand brushed against the rough moss on the cave wall, before finding the heavy bandages wrapped around the object on my back. I gripped the top of the fabric. I didn't hesitate. I exerted a sudden, violent burst of force. A blinding, fiery light erupted from between my fingers. It was brighter than any star in the night sky and felt heavier than a storm cloud. It throbbed like a miniature sun falling from the heavens, right into the palm of my hand. The moment this heat appeared, the bandages turned to ash, dissolving instantly. A blade emerged. The rival pioneers froze. As the light cleared, the silhouette of a hilt took shape. I raised my arm slightly, my fingers locking around the grip, and slowly drew a long, slender tang sword from the radiance. It was a strange weapon. The surface of the steel rippled with patterns that looked like liquid fire. It was so bright it felt like looking directly into the sun. The blade began to vibrate, a low hum of power that sent tremors through the air. A layer of dancing flames clung to the metal, licking at the shadows. I held the sword in a relaxed, low guard, letting the tip lightly touch the ground. The fire didn't stay on the blade. It poured off like molten mercury, spreading across the floor. In less than 1/10 of a second, the earth beneath me turned to charred charcoal. A wave of blistering heat slammed into the room. The 1-star Ghost Axe leader's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "Back! Get back!" he roared, his voice cracking like thunder. He didn't need to tell them twice. As the scorching wind surged, everyone scrambled backward, their feet barely touching the ground as they retreated toward the edge of the underground river. The moment they cleared the space, I raised the Tang's sword and swung it down toward the lava stream. The world went silent. My ears couldn't register any sound other than the roar of power. A pillar of fire erupted from the blade, slicing through the dark cave like a physical beam of light. It was brilliant, magnificent, and terrifying. The ground shattered. Rocks disintegrated into dust. The entire clearing turned a glowing, molten red as the strike carved a line of destruction through the earth. What is this?" Zhang Xiaoya stammered. She looked up in horror, genuinely wondering if my single strike was about to bring the entire cavern down on our heads. I flipped my wrist, driving the blade vertically into the ground. Every stray spark and flickering flame in the air suddenly rushed toward a single point. They converged into a soaring fire dragon that lunged straight into the lava river. The magma boiled violently. Massive bubbles rose and burst with the sound of explosions. Then, a sphere of pure crimson energy began to swell within the molten flow, expanding like a rising sun until it detonated. The blast of heat and fire was suffocating. I squinted through the flying embers, my dark hair whipping around my face as I stared at the intruders. They were paralyzed. Their pupils reflected the dying red glow, their faces masks of pure terror. They didn't know who I was or what my level was. All they saw was a man with a flaming sword that caused secondary explosions like a tactical nuke. Their legs went weak. Without a word, they turned and bolted. They didn't just walk away. They sprinted, scrambling over each other to reach the exit, their retreating backs disappearing into the darkness in a frantic blur. Outside the stone entrance, the rival group finally stopped. One of them was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. His face was ghostly pale. That was a monster, he whispered, his voice trembling. What kind of weapon is that? I've never seen anything so terrifying. The heat in that cave, I felt like I was melting. The blade had fire patterns, another gasped. It burned through its own wrappings the moment he touched it. One swing turned the earth to ash. How are we supposed to compete with that? We're just flesh and blood. They stood there, trading stories of their fear. As pioneers, they were supposed to be the chosen ones of this new era. They thought they were the protagonists of the world. But after seeing that strike, their arrogance was gone. The gap in power was so vast it didn't even leave room for resentment, only survival instincts. I'm glad we didn't fight, the leader muttered, letting out a long, shaky breath. If that blade had hit me, I wouldn't just be dead. I'd be gone, erased. They looked at each other and nodded. They were small fish in a very large, very dangerous pond. They decided right then to give up on this location. They'd rather spend weeks searching for a new spot than face that flaming sword again. Back inside the cave, the silence was heavy. The buzzcut guy was the first to snap out of it. He looked at me and slowly raised a thumb. Boss, that was incredible. That swing was the coolest thing I've ever seen. The smell of scorched earth filled our nostrils. The floor was still smoking. Zhang Xiaoya touched her face, which was still flushed red from the heat. She noticed a lock of her hair had been singed by the passing shockwave. It crumbled to ash between her fingers. She was a one-star ghost axe herself, and she had been proud of it. Now, that pride was in pieces. Suddenly, Oldly snapped out of his meditation. He looked around and let out a high-pitched yelp. What happened? Did a volcano go off? Why is there a giant burning crack in the floor right where I was sitting? He scrambled to his feet, looking at our strange expressions. He poked the buzzcut guy in the shoulder. Hey, what happened? Were we attacked? Talk to me. The buzzcut guy just stared at the scorched earth, his voice a low murmur. Attacked? No, Oldly. We were saved. Are you kidding me? Oldly shouted, his voice cracking. Did you get cooked in there? You're talking nonsense. He looked at the buzzcut guy, who seemed to be in a trance, then turned to Zhang Xiaoya. He frowned, demanding to know what had happened while he was meditating. Zhang Xiaoya gave him a cold, sideways glance. You're lucky, Oldly. You should probably retire from the music scene and focus on your luck instead. You just ran into a real master. She didn't explain further. Her eyes kept drifting back to me. She was convinced I was a high-level attribute practitioner. In her world, that meant I was a top-tier genius, a rarity that the higher-ups would kill to recruit. She was already planning how to report me to her organization. Oldly still didn't get it. He noticed the sword on my back. The cloth that had been wrapped around it was gone, leaving the dark scabbard exposed. Lin Yuan, he asked, pointing at my back. Where's the cloth? Did it burn off? I shrugged, keeping my voice casual. The temperature in here is insane. A little spark from the lava probably caught it. I'm lucky my pants didn't melt off, too. Oldly looked down at the massive, glowing crack in the floor right where he had been sitting. I woke up and saw this giant trench under my feet. It scared the life out of me. I guess the lava just melted through the rock, right? Sounds logical to me. I replied. The buzzcut guy stood behind Oldly, looking like he wanted to scream. He kept tugging at Oldly's sleeve, but the old man just barked at him to stop. The guy tried to signal Oldly with frantic blinks, but Oldly just asked if he was having an eye cramp. We kept moving deeper into the cave. The underground lava river wasn't very long. 10 minutes later, we hit the end of the line. There was nothing else there, just heat and flowing stone. For the others, the lava was the prize. Oldly felt the surge of spiritual energy in the air and was convinced he could break into the next realm if he stayed long enough. We turned back and headed for the entrance. The other team was gone. The stone door stood silent. It was time for us to part ways. Lin Yuan, you didn't get any loot this time, Old Li said, patting my shoulder like we were old friends. Next time, we'll let you have the first pick. You're the youngest, after all. We gotta look out for you. I just smiled. I appreciate that. Thanks. I didn't tell him that I had already taken the lion's share. The buzz-cut guy watched Old Li's hand touching my shoulder, his eyes wide with terror. He looked like he expected my shoulder to explode. I'm heading out first, I said, waving as I walked away. As soon as I was out of earshot, the buzz-cut guy finally exploded. He grabbed Old Li and told him everything. How I had sent the other team running with a single swing of a flaming blade. Old Li stood there, frozen, his face turning pale as the reality sank in. Zhang Xiaoya didn't wait around for them. She had work to do. She got in her car and called her handler at the Spiritual Cultivation Association. I have a report, she said, her voice urgent. I've encountered a high-level attribute practitioner. His talent is off the charts. Another one, the woman on the other end whispered. Zhang Xiaoya blinked. What was that? Nothing. It's been recorded. Keep me updated if you find anything else. The specialist hung up the phone and looked at her screen. She was staring at a report for another practitioner named Su Qingying. She couldn't believe it. 2 high-level talents appearing in the same area at once was a miracle. These people were the future power players of the country. Meanwhile, I was walking through the city. The evening sky was filled with brilliant red clouds, a beautiful fire in the heavens. People stopped to take photos, but I just moved through the crowd. A few people stared at the sword on my back. They whispered about how realistic it looked, assuming I was some dedicated cosplayer. I ignored them and went home. The moment I stepped inside, I took the sword off. The blade had changed. It had absorbed the inner flame attribute from the lava. Even inside the sheath, I could feel the scorching heat radiating from it. It could reach temperatures of 2,000 degrees now. More importantly, it had an explosive property. I wiped the blade down with a dry cloth. I thought about the team I had met earlier. They were 1-star ghost axe practitioners, but they felt weak. Even if I were still at their level, I knew I could crush them. The golden sun breathing technique gave me an edge that no one else had. In a world where everyone was stumbling in the dark, I had a map. I had gained more than just a better sword at the lava river. While Old Li had been meditating, my breathing technique had acted like a vacuum. He only managed to absorb 10% of the spiritual energy in the cave. I took the other 90%. My body was at its limit, buzzing with power. I was right on the verge of a breakthrough. I headed to the back mountain behind my house to find a quiet spot. I sat down and closed my eyes. In my mind, the glowing axe appeared, surrounded by flowing magma. It was starting to swing downward. On another part of the mountain, Su Qingying was wiping sweat from her forehead. She had spent the whole day cleaning up the mess I had left behind during my last session. Suddenly, she froze. The air around her turned hot. The pressure in the atmosphere spiked, making her heart race. Someone was breaking through to the 3-star ghost axe realm. She looked up. The sky didn't just look like a sunset anymore. A massive pillar of golden light erupted into the clouds, turning the entire mountain into a scene from a myth. The light was blinding, yet warm. It felt like standing next to a sun. She stared at the horizon, her voice trembling. Is this just a 3-star breakthrough? Could a 3-star breakthrough really cause a commotion this massive? Su Qingying watched from the distance, her heart hammering against her ribs. In her mind, I wasn't just some talented freak anymore. To her, I was something far more terrifying, a person stepping onto the path of a god. Inside my mind, the pressure of the ghost axe was immense, like a mountain range collapsing onto my shoulders. I didn't rush. I felt the spiritual energy surging within me, but I kept it under a tight leash. The axe remained still at first, resisting my will. I didn't push blindly. I moved with precision, guiding every thread of chi with the steady hand of a master surgeon. Su Qingying sensed it. She had failed her own 3-star breakthrough before, the backlash leaving her bedridden for a week. She expected me to snap under the weight. But I didn't. My foundation was solid, tempered by 1,000 fires. Every drop of energy in my body was pure, earned through grueling cycles of the golden sun technique. To her, I looked like an old master, a hidden monk who had practiced for decades. She couldn't imagine a younger man having this much patience. Then, the axe moved. It swung once, twice. On the third swing, a roar of power erupted. A pillar of light tore through the clouds, turning the dark mountainside into high noon. The brilliance was blinding, a dominant, tyrannical force that refused to be suppressed. It lasted for several long seconds before the world finally faded back to gray. I had done it. I was a 3-star ghost axe practitioner. Su Qingying didn't waste a second. She bolted toward the source of the light, her silhouette a blur in the trees. 3 minutes later, she reached the spot, a lonely ancient tree standing in the silence. There was no one there, not even a bird, just a single leaf drifting slowly to the ground. Again, she screamed, her voice cracking with frustration. Every single time. She kicked the tree in a fit of rage, only for it to dump a pile of dead leaves onto her head. She kicked it again, cursed under her breath, and finally stomped away, covered in forest debris. A few moments after she left, a figure stepped out from behind the trunk. It wasn't me, it was Fong Yi. She watched Su Qingying's retreating back with a raised eyebrow. She had known she was being followed for 3 days. She wasn't angry or shocked. To her, everything was under control. Meanwhile, Su Qingying walked down the mountain path, fuming. She tapped her earpiece to connect with her handler at the association. "I'm being played," she hissed. "There's no way it's a coincidence. Every time I get close, I'm exactly 1 step too late. Last time, I spent all night picking up rabbit meat. The time before that, I stepped away for 1 cup of milk tea, and when I came back, the guy was gone. I spent the rest of the day digging in the dirt like a farmer. And now, I saw the light. 5 seconds. I was 5 seconds away, and he vanished." She sounded like she was on the verge of a breakdown. Her handler stayed silent for a moment, clearly feeling bad for her. "Forget about that for a second," the handler said, his voice turning grave. "I have news. The anomalies have appeared." Su Qingying froze. The color drained from her face. "They're back." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She remembered those monsters, the dark side of the spiritual recovery. They weren't like us. They were twisted, cruel, and lived to torture humans. They were the dark attributes, beings that looked like demons from a horror movie. The last time they appeared, the association lost several top practitioners. She could still see the face of the one she had encountered. Pale, cracked skin, a stench of rot, and eyes like burning coals that felt like they were swallowing her soul. They didn't just kill. They turned death into a symphony of screams and breaking bones. "It's better that you're out there," the handler whispered. "At least you don't have to face them yet. But stay alert. Those things can hide anywhere." Su Qingying nodded weakly. "I understand." A light rain began to fall, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. Lightning sliced through the sky, followed by thunder so loud it felt like the earth's heart was roaring in pain. Back at my window, I watched the storm. The wind whipped my hair across my face as I stared into the darkness. Even for a spiritual recovery, this weather was violent. I pulled up my phone. A new topic was trending at the very top of the forums. Which master is undergoing a heavenly tribulation right now? The video attached showed the exact sky I was looking at. The comments were flooding in by the second. "My 80-year-old grandpa says this is the thickest lightning he's seen in his entire life," one user wrote. "He's terrified." I stared at the screen, then back at the sky. The world was changing faster than anyone realized. And the monsters were already here. I saw a comment on the forums that made me shake my head. Some guy told his grandfather the world was ending just to mock the old man's belief in the thunder god. The poor grandfather actually fainted and had to be rushed to the hospital. The comments were full of people laughing, joking that if the old man died, he'd climb out of his grave just to slap his grandson. I looked away from the screen. A massive bolt of lightning tore through the sky, turning the world white for a split second. The sound was so violent that car alarms down the street started screaming in a chaotic chorus. I tapped my fingers against the window glass. I could feel it. The air was thick with lightning energy, violent, majestic, and terrifying. This wasn't just a storm. It was another sign of the world's great change. My phone buzzed with a government weather alert. It warned everyone to stay indoors because the roads were dangerous. To me, that message was a signal. I smiled and walked to the door. I grabbed my waterproof black coat from the rack. It was sharp, well-tailored, and made me look lean and lethal. I didn't have any fresh cloth to wrap my Tang sword, so I simply hung it at my waist and let the long coat hide the blade's silhouette. I pushed the door open and stepped into the black, rain-soaked night. The thunder sounded like a god screaming in my ear. The sheer pressure of the storm was enough to make most people tremble with a primal, bone-deep fear. I watched as a bolt of lightning, thicker than a python, slammed into the back of the mountain. People in the distance were shouting in terror. They were right to be afraid. That single strike probably vaporized the ancient trees on the ridge. I made my way toward the base of Yuhuang Peak. The night felt endless. Rain flowed over the ground like a river. Up on the mountain, a bolt hit an old, ruined temple. The walls exploded. The roof collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris, and the ancient statues shattered into 1,000 pieces. In the eyes of the heavens, even the gods of the past were nothing but dust. Lightning has always been the ultimate power. It is the tool of heavenly tribulation and divine punishment. Every bolt carried a factor of pure, unadulterated violence. Even with my current strength, I knew I had to be careful. But as the wind whipped around the mountainside like a black river, I didn't turn back. I stood there, my eyes glowing with a golden light that pierced through the thick, white fog. I looked up at the sky. The lightning was like a hurricane of white fire, but it wasn't enough. The base of the mountain was too far from the source. To get the purest lightning energy, I had to go higher. I had to go to the center of the storm. Anyone else would have been shredded instantly, even inside an armored vehicle. But I had the golden sun breathing technique. I began to circulate my chi. Golden light steamed off my skin, flowing through my veins like molten ore. My breathing fell into a rhythmic pattern, and the golden glow settled over me like protective scales. In that moment, I felt like a sun monarch descending into a world of shadow. I took a step forward, then another. A roar of purple thunder descended from the clouds, slamming directly into my body. I let out a low growl as the electricity surged through me. I didn't stop. I took another step, and the sky responded with a barrage of strikes. I was swallowed by purple light. Electricity crawled over my skin, jumping from my fingers and hair. I looked like a god of thunder forged in the rain. The pain was incredible. Even with my golden shield, the lightning felt like thousands of arrows piercing my flesh. My skin began to scorch and melt under the golden light. Boulders near me exploded into pebbles. Nearby mountain ends and structures were reduced to splinters in seconds. Nothing built by man could stand against this. I touched my ears. I couldn't hear anything anymore. The world had gone silent, replaced by a heavy, vibrating pressure that threatened to crush my soul. This was the destruction of the old era and the birth of the new. To be a pioneer means to go against the will of heaven. It means doing what others call impossible to find a path for those who follow. The deeper I walked into the lightning zone, the heavier the weight became. It felt like the entire sky was resting on my shoulders. Every bone in my body creaked. Every muscle trembled. I gritted my teeth and forced my legs to move. I took one more step, and the world exploded again. My veins bulged like thick vines under my skin. My joints popped and cracked with every movement. The closer I got to the center of the storm, the more the pressure doubled. It felt like a mountain was resting on my back, forcing my spine to curve. By the time I reached the edge of the lightning's core, my vision blurred. I saw stars. It felt like my very soul had been struck by a hammer, and I nearly collapsed. I pushed back. The golden light around me exploded with intensity. This was the golden sun breathing technique pushed to its absolute limit. Lightning is a tyrannical force. It wanted me to bow. It wanted everyone to crawl in the dirt to show its majesty. I felt the heat rising in my neck. I forced myself to stand tall, staring directly up at the sky. My bones rattled from the shock waves, but I kept my face calm. I stood straight as a spear. Thousands of bolts crashed down. I grit my teeth and looked into the heart of the clouds. My voice shook from the cold and the power, but I didn't back down. I told the sky I would make this power mine. I pushed the breathing technique even harder. It wasn't enough. I needed more. The black cloud swirled. A massive strike slammed into me, but the golden light began to swallow it. My system flickered to life. It detected the raw lightning attribute and began the process of refinement. This was the divine thunder tempering. I was using the heavens to forge my body into something divine. I let the rain and electricity wash over me, a smirk forming on my lips. A bolt of purple lightning pierced through me, connecting the sky to the earth. It felt like a god had descended. The electricity dove into my blood, mixing with the golden energy of the sun. Purple and gold light swirled together. In ancient times, cultivators were like living legends with bodies as tough as mountains. They were immortal, and lightning was the ultimate weapon, the most aggressive element in existence. Unlike the warmth of the sun, lightning was a jagged spear. It made me sharper. It made me harder. Once my body was tempered by this, nothing else would be able to break my defense. It was my spear and my shield all at once. I felt a wild, frantic joy. People always focus on the destructive power of a lightning user, but they forget that a body capable of holding that power is indestructible. I had no weaknesses now. Down below, the world was in chaos. People wondered why the lightning kept hitting the same spot. It was too strange. The city guard had already arrived, cordoning off the area and setting up barriers. They stared up at the peak of the mountain with wide eyes. To them, it looked like an apocalypse. They were just glad the mountain had been evacuated, even if the ancient temples were being reduced to ash. Then they saw it. A figure in black was walking down the mountain, stepping calmly through the chaos. They couldn't believe their eyes. How could anyone survive that? Before they could move in to question me, I vanished into the rain. I made it back to my apartment. The elevator dinged, and I stepped out, my long black trench coat dripping water all over the floor. I looked like a drowned rat. The first thing I did was toss the coat in the trash. The lightning had shredded it into rags. I sat on my sofa. I should have been exhausted, but I felt like a marathon runner at the peak of his high. My energy was overflowing. When I first started absorbing the lightning, it felt like my body was being torn apart. It was pure agony, but now that it was over, I felt more alive than ever. I closed my eyes and focused on the divine thunder tempering. I could feel the electrical currents dancing through my cells like tiny snakes. It wasn't just destruction, it was a rebirth. Every spark was polishing my bones and strengthening my meridians. It felt like I was in a forge, sparks flying everywhere, but the pain had turned into a strange, numbing comfort. My golden blood was now laced with streaks of violet. My skin felt denser, more solid. My physical stats had jumped several times over. If I had to walk into that storm again, it wouldn't hurt nearly as much. I looked out the window at the rain. I felt a bit of regret. Once I pulled the lightning into my body, the judgment of the sky ended. The clouds were just gray now, with no more bolts to offer. I wondered if what I just did was like the legendary tribulation from the old stories. Back then, experts had to survive 81 strikes to advance. If I had taken that many hits earlier, I probably would have died. Those ancient masters were the real deal. Still, I was excited. Tribulation is a mark of the strong. It's a hurdle on the path to evolution. I found myself hoping for another storm so I could test my new body again. I checked my status. The lightning attribute gave me a 300% boost to critical damage and the power to purge evil. It was the ultimate power of judgment. And now, it belonged to me. Would you like the summary of the next chapter? The sheer violence of this lightning attribute was staggering. I couldn't help but click my tongue in amazement. In this era of spiritual recovery, humans weren't the only ones evolving. In fact, we were often the weakest link. First comes the change in the world itself, then the mutation of plants and animals. I had already dealt with that mutated rabbit, but the supernatural horrors yet to come would be far worse. Having this lightning power was like receiving charcoal during a blizzard. It was exactly what I needed to hunt those entities down. I stared at my Tang sword, wondering if I could force the lightning attribute into the blade. It already possessed the yang attribute, and adding lightning would theoretically make it indestructible. But I shook my head and dismissed the idea. The sword was already saturated with pure yang energy. Adding another element would ruin that purity. I wanted a weapon of absolute, singular power. Besides, if I crammed too many conflicting attributes into the blade, the internal pressure might cause the sword to shatter. So, where should I put it? I considered buying a second blade and dual wielding, But then my eyes drifted down to my own right hand. My grip tightened. If I fused the lightning into my hand, I wouldn't need to carry extra weight, and it would become a permanent part of my combat style. I didn't hesitate. I gave the command to fuse the attribute. Immediately, dense patterns of lightning etched themselves into my skin. A numbing, tingling sensation crawled up my arm. Then, white bolts began to spark and boil in the center of my palm. The aura was terrifying. Every flicker of electricity carried the weight of divine judgment. My right hand was now a vessel for unimaginable energy. I raised it casually, and a violet arc erupted from my palm, coiling upward like a brilliant dragon. Thunder rumbled within the small room. I clenched my fist, and the light intensified, illuminating everything with a blinding, violent glare. My right hand could now feel the surge of electrical energy in the very air around me. I could sense the difference between my two hands instantly. If I faced that rabbit again, I wouldn't need a weapon. I could crush it into dust with my bare hand. This power was absolute. I was becoming a walking god of storms. Meanwhile, back at the peak of Mount Yuhuang, the atmosphere was tense. The heavy rain continued to fall, but the area had been cordoned off with red warning tape. A group of soldiers in crisp uniforms moved through the ruins like ghosts. Their movements were disciplined and silent. These weren't ordinary troops. They were elite special forces. The crowds of onlookers were stunned. People whispered in the dark, wondering what kind of natural disaster could summon such violent lightning. Even from a kilometer away, the hair on their arms stood on end. The military began clearing the area, their cold, firm gazes pushing back the curious and the seekers who hoped to find some leftover miracle in the debris. Two worlds were being separated by a single thin line of red tape. A high-ranking officer stood before the local city defense team. His aura was suffocating, his eyes sharp and piercing. The local guards couldn't even look him in the eye. "You said you saw someone walk out of there?" the officer asked. His voice was calm, but it carried an undeniable authority. "Yes, sir," one of the guards stammered. "We were nearby when the lightning hit. We saw a figure emerge from the center of the strike." The guard described the scene in detail. Even now, residual electricity danced in the clouds above like dragons, making everyone's scalp itch. It was a disaster zone, yet a man had walked through it unscathed. The guards realized that the soldiers in front of them carried an aura very similar to that mysterious man. "Sir, what exactly is happening?" the guard asked, unable to contain his curiosity. "Everything has been so strange lately." The officer's face remained cold. "You don't need to know what you shouldn't ask. When the time is right, you'll be told." The guards were led away, leaving the elite team to process the wreckage. A man named Hanley stood up, brushing mud from his pants. He looked toward the center of the blast. A temple that once stood there was now nothing but splinters and dust. A Buddha statue lay half buried, its head shattered. The surrounding hotels and houses were ruins. Nothing had survived, except for that one person. Hanley searched the debris but found no physical evidence, no footprints, nothing. Another awakened. Hanley muttered, "This is the 66th one recorded." He walked out of the heart of a lightning strike on Yuhuang Peak. Witnesses described him as violent and powerful. He paused, thinking of a name for the file. Let's call him the Tyrant for now. It was clear this man had seized a massive opportunity from the storm. In this era, awakened were either lucky commoners or sharp-witted geniuses. This Tyrant seemed like the latter, someone who actively chased the anomalies of the world. Those were the dangerous ones. If he turned against society, the disaster would be catastrophic. "We need to start a census immediately," Hanley ordered. "Find him. And for now, total media blackout. Lock down all information." Hanley looked frustrated. He reached into his pocket for a cigarette, but it was empty. He tightened his brow and finally dialed a number. He needed to release a smoke screen, tell the public it was just a natural disaster. I didn't know it yet, but because of me, many powerful people were losing sleep that night. Back in my apartment, I sat on the sofa, testing my right hand. Since I'd infused it with the power of lightning, it had changed. A silver-white tattoo shaped like a lightning bolt now crawled across my palm and the back of my hand. I clenched my fist. Thunder surged within my grip. It felt completely different from before. My right hand had become the most indestructible part of my body. The lightning attribute didn't just boost my raw power. It gave me a massive advantage against anything supernatural or evil. Against those entities, I now dealt 300% critical damage. That meant if I ran into something demonic, a single slap from me would hit like a literal thunderclap. I was becoming a nightmare for anything that bumped in the night. I smiled, watching the white arcs of electricity dance between my fingers. They were blindingly bright, yet they felt as obedient as a pet kitten. I felt confident. Among the awakened, or precursors, I had to be at the very top. Later, I started scrolling through the news, a habit I'd picked up. I realized that whenever the world changed, the government issued warnings to protect the public. For people like me, those warnings were clues. One headline caught my eye. Explosion at chemical plant, no casualties. I frowned. Usually, when things explode these days, there's a 99% chance something else is going on. I clicked the link. The official statement said the explosion caused black smoke and urban pollution, urging citizens not to panic. There were photos of the factory half submerged in a sea of fire under a twilight sky. Huge clouds of black light rose into the air, staining half the heavens pitch black. It looked terrifying. The comments section was where the real information lived. Was it really just an explosion? One user asked. I live nearby. It felt eerie. I don't know how to describe it. Like a cold, evil aura, someone replied. Yes, exactly that. Cold and evil. Then the skeptics chimed in, calling them crazy or depressed. But as I scrolled down, a notification popped up. The comment you are viewing has been folded. Then, the entire post vanished. I tried to refresh, but the account that posted it was already deactivated. This was a classic cover-up. The government was desperate to kill the discussion. It meant that cold and evil comment had hit the nail on the head. I looked out my window. The rain was pouring down, turning the city into a gray, hazy blur. Was something waking up in the shadows? Something that fed on the living? While the rest of the city stayed inside, cozy and warm, two figures moved through the downpour. They wore black raincoats, moving with the agility of hunting hawks. Silver earpieces flickered on their heads, the only light in the darkness. Tracking file number 7. The leader whispered into his comms. Anomaly, Night Chaser. Ability, merging with shadows. It makes a faint sizzling sound when it gets close. It's a man-eater. Please update the file. Received, a voice crackled back. Proceed with caution. We need that data. The leader looked at the neon lights of the city. People were still dreaming in their eggshells, protected from the chaos outside. That was the government's goal, to keep the world feeling normal for as long as possible. This night chaser is tricky, the leader muttered. It's hard to find in this rain, but it has to eat. We can't let it find a civilian. Help is nearby, the comms replied. A member of the Spiritual Cultivation Association is in that sector on an observation mission. We're sending him to assist you. Good. We need all the eyes we can get. Meanwhile, across town, Su Qingying stood in the security booth of an apartment complex, getting ready for her shift. Since everything that had happened to her, her life had taken a very strange turn. Su Qingying was about 80% sure that the high-attribute pioneer she was looking for lived in this very apartment complex. Taking a job as a temporary security guard was the perfect cover. It let her observe every resident coming and going, and she got to collect 2 paychecks at once. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She hummed a little tune to herself, feeling lighthearted as she prepared to change into her uniform for a patrol. Hey, Xiao Su, a coworker called out, interrupting her thoughts. Can you swap shifts with me tonight? I've got some personal stuff to take care of. Su Qingying opened her mouth to say no. She wasn't a fan of staying up all night. But before she could speak, she felt a familiar vibration in her earpiece. Sorry, I have to take this, she said, stepping out of the security booth. She checked to make sure no one was watching, then tapped the device. Commissioner Su Qingying, a voice crackled in her ear. New assistance mission. Help the Ravager squad handle file number 7, Bamboo Leaf. Location sent to your bracelet. The squad is en route and will arrive in 27 minutes. Anomaly, Bamboo Leaf? Su Qingying's expression turned grim. Anomalies were powerful, twisted creatures. They were born of corruption and possessed enough strength to level a city if left unchecked. If they didn't act fast, The entire sector could spiral into a total crisis. Outside, the night was a wall of water. The rain fell so hard it seemed to swallow the light from the surrounding skyscrapers. The world was silent, save for the relentless drumming of the storm. Sizzle, a sharp, grating sound sliced through the quiet. Near a pile of trash in a dark alley, a pair of crimson eyes snapped open. They glowed like burning candles in the dark. This was Bamboo Leaf. It loved the dark, the damp, and the taste of human flesh. It looked like a gaunt, twisted rat, its skin a sickly black that seemed to absorb what little light remained. A thin, frog-like membrane covered its brow, and its elongated limbs and whip-like tail reeked of rot and death. High above on a rooftop, several figures watched the creature. Their silver earpieces flickered. "Thanks to you, we pinned this thing down," the leader said, glancing at the person beside him. It was Su Qingying. She had ditched her post to meet them. She shrugged. "Bamboo Leaf likes dark, wet places. I've patrolled every inch of this area. This was the most likely spot." The squad leader nodded. He looked at her outfit and raised an eyebrow. "I see. But why are you wearing a security guard uniform?" "Personal hobby," she replied coolly. The Ravagers had arrived just in time. The creature hadn't killed anyone yet. The leader turned to his team, his voice dropping into a serious, commanding tone. "Minimize civilian casualties. Your safety comes first. If anything goes sideways, report to me immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Clear?" "Understood, Captain," the three members replied, their eyes bright behind their masks. The captain took a deep breath and gave the order. "Move out." Suddenly, their coats flared as if caught in a gale. Spiritual chi surged from their bodies, coating them in a faint, moonlight-like glow. The captain led the way, leaning forward and dropping off the edge of the building. The others followed, leaping into the abyss with their arms spread like wings. They glided through the air like a silent breeze. They hit the stone pavement with a single, synchronized thud that was buried by the sound of the rain. But the creature was fast. Even as they landed, Bamboo Leaf snapped its head toward them. Those blood-red eyes locked onto the squad like a pair of daggers. "It spotted us," the captain noted. There was no need for further commands. The squad moved with the wordless synergy of veterans who had faced death together 1,000 times. They fanned out, instantly cutting off the creature's escape routes. North, south, east, and west, every exit was blocked. Bamboo Leaf was trapped in the narrow alley. It hissed, its red eyes glowing brighter, like a cornered beast. A piercing, ear-smashing shriek echoed through the empty streets. It was a sound that crawled under the skin. The creature bared its teeth at the captain, its rotting wings fluttering as it radiated a raw, predatory malice. The temperature in the alley plummeted. The captain acted. He pressed 2 fingers together, channeling his chi into a razor-sharp blade of energy. With a flick, the invisible edge sliced through the rain and sheared off a clump of the creature's coarse fur. Bamboo Leaf roared. The sound was like a clap of thunder, so powerful it physically pushed the falling rain away. The squad members recoiled as a wave of invisible pressure rippled outward. A metal dumpster nearby was shredded into scrap metal in an instant, and deep gouges appeared in the concrete as if a giant had scraped it with a claw. If they hadn't jumped back, their bones would have been crushed. "This thing is strong," the captain muttered, his face tightening. The anomaly opened its maw, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. A thick, black mist erupted from its throat. It was a foul, corrosive fog that hissed as it touched the asphalt. Within seconds, a massive hole was eaten into the road, leaving nothing but a smoking pit of darkness. Dark attribute corrosion, one of the members analyzed. It deconstructs everything it touches. Without a high-level elemental counter, this is going to be a nightmare to handle. Suddenly, an old street lamp overhead flickered and exploded. The alley plunged into total darkness. "Careful," the captain barked. In the shadows, the crimson eyes shifted. The creature lunged, aiming straight for the weakest point in their formation, the southeast corner. The guard on that side tried to intercept, but the impact sent him flying. In a single second, Bamboo Leaf was gone, vanishing into the night like a streak of black lightning. "Don't let it get away," the captain yelled. "Pursue." The Ravager squad didn't hesitate. They turned into shadows themselves, sprinting through the rain. The creature fled through the labyrinth of city alleys with no apparent plan, guided only by instinct. But the squad was relentless. They stayed glued to its trail, shadows chasing a shadow through the dying light of the city. The scout followed at the back of the formation. He was the same member who had been bypassed earlier during the initial breakout. Strictly speaking, he wasn't a frontline fighter. He served as the team's lighthouse, the tactical brain responsible for integrating information and mapping out their path. He lifted his wrist, revealing a silver-white watch. It was a new piece of auxiliary equipment developed by the Spiritual Cultivation Association, designed to detect the concentration of nearby anomalies. Under normal circumstances, a squad like ours could handle a threshold of 50. Bamboo Leaf, a high-attribute anomaly, sat at a concentration of 48. The technology wasn't perfect yet. The positioning was shaky, so we mostly used it for power readings. But when the scout looked at the display, his pupils dilated. "Wait," he stammered. "It just broke 80. It's still rising. There's more than one anomaly here." We froze. The command was silent but understood. We pulled our formation tight, standing back to back as we scanned the surroundings. We were inside an abandoned factory. Old machinery was draped in thick cobwebs, and half-finished parts sat frozen on the assembly line. The smell of dried, coagulated machine oil hung heavy in the air. Between the dim light and the heavy rain blurring our vision, we hadn't realized we were walking into a trap. Even as pioneers of the spiritual chi recovery, we were vulnerable. Did we fall for it? Captain Ching then whispered. This place didn't feel like a dead end for a cornered beast. It felt like a cage designed to catch us all. In the shadows, a massive black snake slowly turned its body. Its frame was thick with bulging muscle, covered in scales the color of death that shimmered with an eerie light. Its long tongue flicked in and out, releasing a suffocating, fishy stench. Every time those scales scraped against the floor, my heart shivered. The hissing echoed through the rusted machines like a taunt. It was a dark attribute serpent. Bamboo Leaf had played us. He had faked a retreat to lure us into this factory, knowing that dark attribute creatures were the masters of concealment. A loud boom shook the floor. The snake's tail slammed the heavy iron doors shut, sealing us in. Silence fell, thick with unease. With our vision stripped away, my other senses became painfully sharp. My ears were filled with that constant hissing. A cold, sinister energy brushed against my skin, making my stomach turn. I couldn't see Bamboo Leaf, but I could hear the faint sound of a tail dragging across the concrete. We were completely on the defensive. Suddenly, a foul odor hit me, sharp enough to pierce my skull. Dark attribute toxic mist. "Move," the captain barked. It was too late for one of us. A member nearby couldn't dodge in time. The mist clung to his arm, a freezing sensation burning through his clothes. He gasped, reaching out to touch his limb, only to pull his hand back covered in warm, wet blood. The corrosion was instant. Even in the dark, I knew his arm was a bloody mess. "Retreat," the captain ordered. The mist was more aggressive than any chemical acid I'd ever heard of. We grabbed the wounded man and bolted toward the door, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. We managed to wrap his arm with torn fabric, but the metallic scent of blood now mixed with the stinging stench of the black fog. "Captain, the mist is still spreading," someone whispered, fear creeping into their voice. "We're going to die in here." We were blind. We couldn't find the exit, so we could only hide. But the factory was a finite space. Eventually, the mist would find every corner. Waiting to die wasn't the Ravager squad style. We were a sharp sword. If an anomaly wanted our lives, we would pierce its throat before we went down. "Take care of him," the captain said, stepping forward. "I'll find Bamboo Leaf's position. Listen for his movement. I'll try to pin him in the center. When I do, you strike." "Understood," we replied in unison. The captain surged forward, using his vast spiritual chi to tear a hole through the black fog. He disappeared into the darkness. Immediately, the sounds of a violent struggle erupted. Glass shattered to our right. Something heavy slammed into a wall. I couldn't tell if it was man or beast. Parts of an old machine collapsed, kicking up a cloud of choking dust. The rain outside was so loud it drowned out our hearing, leaving us to guess positions based on fleeting echoes. We would track Bamboo Leaf for a second, only to lose him the next. A sound like a roaring campfire filled the room, the heat of the friction searing our nerves. Then, a heavy thud. This time, I heard a familiar, muffled groan. Bamboo Leaf was darting through the shadows like a maniac. The captain was fast, meeting every strike, but he was starting to fall behind. The captain scrambled up, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were squeezed shut, yet the mist was still corroding his skin. 2 streaks of blood leaked from his closed lids. The air in the room felt compressed, heavy. Every breath he took was filled with the scent of that black fog. Was this really the end? Once the factory was full of mist, it would be a slow, agonizing death. The fog was like a thick shroud, blocking out the stars and the exit. Even if we found a way out, we didn't have the strength left to run. My chi is almost gone, the captain muttered to himself. The fight had drained him. Without his chi as a shield, the mist would dissolve his body in seconds. He had pushed the beast hard, or we would have been submerged already. But the anomaly was smart. It didn't need to attack anymore. It just had to stay hidden and keep breathing out that fog until we all rotted away. These things weren't just animals. They had intelligence. The captain let out a bitter laugh. He couldn't even sense where the rest of us were anymore. We were all sinking into this swamp of darkness, pulled down by a weight we couldn't fight. There was no strength left, no hope of rescue. The hissing circled his ears like a death warrant. For the first time, the captain felt a wave of pure, cold despair. All he could hear was the sound of the endless rain. The black mist continued to swallow the captain's transparent chi shield. It was the color of death, filling every corner of the abandoned factory. In the middle of that torrential rain, I moved. I was a dark shadow, rushing toward the chaos, eventually coming to a stop on the roof of a decaying residential building overlooking the site. Rain slid off my cloak in heavy sheets. I watched the factory in silence. It turned out the people monitoring me all this time were from the Spiritual Cultivation Association. At least they knew the rules. They hadn't dared to disturb my personal life. I looked down at the surging tide of black fog. So, this was what they called an anomaly. 10 minutes ago, I had been scouring the internet for keywords like cold, evil, and unnatural. I found nothing. When the government wants to hide something, they don't leave a paper trail. That was why the spiritual recovery was still a secret to the masses. I only managed to piece together the word anomaly from some cryptic riddles left by online sleuths. Now, seeing these mysterious creatures with my own eyes, I finally understood what that word meant. I stepped off the edge of the ruined building. The rain drummed against my trench coat, a crisp, rhythmic sound as I fell. I landed and stepped directly into the black mist. In an instant, I unleashed the golden sun breathing technique. Blinding golden light exploded from my body. It felt like a physical weight, a scorching radiance that acted like a massive sword cutting through a realm of darkness. The black mist twisted and surged, looking like a trapped beast from a deep abyss, but it didn't matter. In a heartbeat, half of it was incinerated. Darkness attribute, I muttered softly. My aura surged. The grand, searing heat crushed the surrounding fog. The dark shadows within the mist tried to flee, but they dissolved under the golden sun's light like insects struggling under a magnifying glass. They had no way to fight back. It was a total cleansing. The extreme yang attribute of my chi was their natural enemy. They retreated, cornered by the light, with nowhere left to run. Sizzle! A massive black snake lunged out of the remaining fog, hissing with rage. Its scales were torn in several places, leaking thick blood. It had clearly been fighting someone else and was already injured, though the wounds weren't fatal. It opened its massive maw, fangs dripping with black venom, trying to swallow me whole. It didn't even get close. I drew my blade. The tang sword reflected the flame patterns of my chi. With a searing, violent heat, I swung. A thin red line of fire streaked through the air. A matching red line appeared right between the snake's eyes. The next second, that line split the entire creature in two. Its head cracked open, the body falling away to both sides. Then came the explosion. It sounded like a clap of thunder from inside the snake's carcass. Intense flames erupted, turning the remains into a roaring bonfire. The air warped from the heat. Broken scales glittered in the fire like rubies. The heavy, powerful body was blown into charred fragments, filling the air with the suffocating stench of sulfur. As the shockwave faded, only a mess remained. The shattered head lay in the dust, its giant eyes still frozen in a cold, murderous stare. It hadn't even realized it was dead. All that malice and destruction had been wiped out by a single strike. If anyone had seen this, they would have been paralyzed with awe. But inside the thickest part of the fog, the destroyer team saw nothing. The snake was dead, but the air still hissed. Another small beast lunged at me. This one was incredibly fast. I frowned slightly and thrust my palm forward. Lightning flooded my hand. Thousands of electrical currents intertwined in my palm, condensing into a terrifying power of judgment. The moment my palm touched the creature, the lightning exploded. A brilliant flash lit up the entire factory like a bolt from the heavens. The small beast's body shattered like falling rock, its energy erupting in a chaotic dance of sparks. One loud bang, and it was gone. Only fragments rained down onto the floor. I didn't hesitate for a second. This triple critical strike, power was savage. I looked at my palm as the lightning faded. The charred mess on the ground was proof of the destruction. That small beast was likely at the 3-star Ghost Axe realm, while the snake was only 2-star. Neither could survive a single blow from me. Attribute suppression, instant kills. Even if I fought something at a higher level, I was confident I could handle it. It might just take a bit more effort. It seemed my actual combat strength was quite high among the awakened. I let out a short laugh. According to the info I'd gathered, these anomalies were a massive headache for the government. They had to send in professional teams to deal with them. By that logic, I was now a one-man professional team. Having cleared the threats, I turned and left the factory without looking back. I had come here for one reason, to test my strength. I had my answer. Inside the factory, the members of the destroyer team were at their limit. Their chi was gone. Without that protection, the mist was corroding their skin with terrifying ease. They huddled in the corner, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the end. But the end didn't come. They waited, but the next attack never landed. It was like the monster had simply vanished. Do you feel that? The mist is thinning, someone whispered, voice trembling. They all looked up. The pitch-black fog that had blotted out the sky was fading. Before, it was like a thick, heavy shroud. Now, it was a thin veil. They could finally see the outlines of the room again. It's not just the mist, another teammate said, getting excited. I smell something. Like something burned. I smell it too. And blood. A lot of blood. Is someone hurt? Without the pungent stench of the mist, the smell of charred meat and fresh blood was overwhelming. Everyone looked at each other, completely baffled. They crawled toward each other, trying to group up in the dim light. Check the surroundings, the team leader ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. He was the first to stand up. He forced his eyes open, circulating his chi to clear his vision. As the scene before him came into focus, his face paled instantly. The calm mask he usually wore shattered, replaced by raw horror. How is this even possible? He stammered. The rest of the destroyer team stood in the middle of the derelict factory, staring at a sight they would never forget. In a pool of black gore, the serpent anomaly had been sliced clean in two. The ground was soaked in blood, but the edges of the wound were charred. A pure, scorching energy, the essence of extreme yang, still pulsed in the air. The team members swapped looks of pure shock. Where did an awakened with such high-level yang energy come from? Su Qingying clutched her injured arm, her pale face tight with thought. It's him, she said firmly. I think I know what happened. The team leader looked at her. The monitoring mission? Yes, Su Qingying replied, a flicker of embarrassment crossing her face. I was assigned to monitor a high-level awakened with extreme yang energy. It's him. I've been following him, but every time I thought I was close to finding him, he'd vanish. It was like he was playing with me. She felt a chill run down her spine. All this time, she thought she was the hunter. In reality, her target had been monitoring her. He knew exactly where she was. I was supposed to protect him, she whispered, her voice complex. But instead, he ended up saving us. The destroyer team went silent. They didn't know what to say. This was beyond talented. This was legendary. To think a powerhouse like that was hiding in a rundown apartment complex right under their noses. Wait, one of the scouts said, pointing to a corner. His voice was heavy. You said he has yang energy. Then what the hell is that? He was pointing at the bamboo leaf anomaly. The creature's corpse was a blackened mess, riddled with the unmistakable scars of a lightning strike. Even now, blue sparks danced across its skin. When the scout reached out, a stray bolt snapped at his finger, making him hiss in pain. That's lightning energy, the scout muttered. And judging by the purity, it's another high-level attribute. Su Qingying's eyes widened. But he's a Yang user. I saw the traces myself yesterday. It was definitely Yang. The team leader looked between the two corpses. Are you saying two different people were here? Within 5 minutes of each other, one killed the snake, the other killed the leaf, and then they both just left. Su Qingying stayed silent. The math didn't add up. The world wasn't that small. I just checked the footprints and the strike patterns. The investigation specialist interrupted, adjusting his glasses. He sounded hesitant, like he didn't believe his own findings. Based on the analysis, it was the same person. One man killed them both. The air in the factory suddenly felt very thin. A dual attribute awakened, lightning and yang. Both were high-level, destructive elements. This wasn't just a powerful cultivator. This was a monster. The gap between them was humiliating. They were all in the Ghost Axe realm, yet these anomalies had nearly wiped them out. This stranger had walked in and deleted them both with single strikes. It was clean. It was surgical. I need to report this to headquarters, Su Qingying said, breaking the daze. The others just nodded. They felt like they were in a dream. Su Qingying stepped aside to make the call. She had 2 missions, monitor the Yang user and kill the bamboo leaf. She could close them both at once, but she knew the higher-ups were going to lose their minds. A dual attribute genius was a strategic resource. In this era of recovering spiritual chi, every organization was desperate for talent. Whoever held the strongest awakened held the power to rewrite the world order. A person like this was a golden ticket to the future. She tapped her earpiece and gave the report. There was a long silence on the other end. "Hello?" she asked, tapping the device. Static hissed, then cleared. "Come back." The dispatcher's voice finally came through. "The association has decided to stop the monitoring." Su Qingying froze. What? What? From what we can see, he has no ill will toward us. He saved your lives, which means he isn't an enemy. But if we keep sending people to monitor him, he might start seeing it as harassment. We cannot afford to annoy him. Su Qingying was stunned. In her year with the association, she had never heard them sound so cautious, almost afraid. They were terrified of making a bad impression. She looked back at the lightning-scarred corpse. Rain was pouring through the broken roof, but the heat from the strike was still steaming off the body. He was that strong. Back at the high-end apartment, I stepped through my front door. I pulled off my black raincoat and hung it up, the smell of ozone still clinging to my skin. I hung my raincoat on the rack by the door and looked down at my right hand. Faint arcs of lightning still flickered across my skin, dancing like tiny golden snakes. The world was changing faster than anyone realized. Based on my memories and the signs I had seen, the true, official spiritual recovery was still a year away. But the earth was already restless. Strange phenomena were popping up everywhere. The weather had turned erratic and unpredictable. Thunder roared constantly over the peak of Mount Yuhuang, and rivers of molten lava were rumored to be flowing through secret underground caverns. Those of us who had already stepped onto the path of cultivation, the pioneers, could feel it. Once you opened the interface between your body and the spiritual world, your senses became incredibly sharp. You could feel the pulse of the planet. The group I encountered in the underground river was proof of this. They weren't there by accident. They had felt the shift in the atmosphere and went looking for the source. All over the country, these wild cultivators were already reaching the one-star Ghost Axe realm on their own. They were desperate. They were actively hunting for cracks in the world where spiritual chi was leaking out, hungry to increase their strength before the real storm hit. Right now, we were in a period of uneasy calm. Most pioneers were too busy exploring and hiding in the shadows to start any real trouble. The government still had things under control, and major conflicts between cultivators hadn't broken out yet. But the state was moving behind the scenes. They had already formed the Spiritual Cultivation Association. Even though they hadn't officially announced their identity to the public, that national watermark on the posts was a clear signal. It was a hand reached out in friendship to the wild pioneers. It was an invitation, but it was also a warning. The authorities were watching, and they were ready to lead.